What is going on, everybody? It is episode 638 of Pop Culture Crisis. My name is Brett, and I am here once again with my co-host. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Crisis Actors. It's Mary. Happy Friday. And today, obviously, as always, we have a special guest on the show. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, contrary to popular belief, I am not Ethan Van Sciver. I know that there was some mix-up on
there was some misunderstanding in the chat
yes,
from what
indeed.
I saw.
No, my name is Matthew Kadish. I'm a novelist, I'm a podcaster, YouTuber, and I am the owner-operator of the Las Vegas Podcaster Studios out in beautiful, sunny, crime-filled Las Vegas.
Sunny, crime-filled, there you go.
Yeah.
Very hot.
City.
Yes, hot Las Vegas. And host of the Salty Nerd podcast.
Yep, well, one of the hosts.
One of the hosts,
yeah.
yes. I say this because I like to go on, like you have me on sometimes on Saturday mornings, and it's morning for you. It's not for me. If it was morning for me, I wouldn't be doing it because.
What is it for you?
It's like 1 p.m. It's like 1 p.m.
Yeah, there's
me.
like a 3-hour time difference.
Yeah, so for me, it's perfect because I'm like okay, so sometimes like there's like a radio station around here. It's like, do you want to come in and talk about Disney? And I'm like, what time? 8 a.m. I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about Disney at 8 in the morning. That's literally the last possible time I would want to talk about Disney
or anything.
In a fog
in
of
general.
time. Yeah, no.
Oh man,
no,
I'll talk about Disney no matter what time, what day.
We'll give you.
I'm all there.
We'll give your number to them. How about that?
So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about today, but before we get started, guys, would you hit the like button on this video and please subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed here already. We are past 119,000 subscribers and we are working our way to 120, so thank you all so much for being part of the show. Remember to share these shows and the live streams and the segments with your friends, family, loved ones, the people you hate, the people you're ambivalent about. The more people that see these episodes, the more people that see these segments, the farther this show can find a reach. So thank you so much for that. And remember, all super chats $20 and over. We will interrupt the discussion, and that will annoy everybody, but we will interrupt the discussion. We will read the super chat right then and there, and then we will do our very best to answer your question and then get back on topic. So today, what are we going to talk about? Well, right before we went live yesterday, I think it came out like an hour before we went live.
Which always happens.
It's literally always like an hour right before the show. It always is like nothing, and then they're like, "Why don't you talk about it?" I'm like, because I have no idea what it is yet. James O'Keefe released the Disney tapes, which calls out the anti-white discrimination that's going on over at Disney. To anybody in this space that already talks about this stuff, you just say, "First time." And to everybody else, who's not, initiated to what's going on in certain aspects of the entertainment side of the culture war, they're like, wow, this is crazy. So there's some undercover interviews. I still have no idea how they get away with that. It's amazing.
You go on a Hinge date with one of these executives at Disney. They have one glass of wine and they're ready to spill their guts about all of the laws that they're breaking.
So we're going to talk about that. We are also going to, so yesterday, we discussed the unbelievably amazing video from Amanda Stenberg where she,
It amazed me.
It was amazing,
It's technically amazing.
What was the phrase I used yesterday? The Empire claps back.
Oh yeah, I used that for the YouTube short we posted.
So, she's the Empire, and she twerked back at the people who are hating on her.
She twerked on the haters.
And after we posted a video reacting to that, us, like many other YouTubers, were censored, silenced, copyright struck. Is that the right phrasing of that? So we're going to go into
Amanda, you're being called out. Stop targeting us. We are allowed to critique you and make fun of you.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about that. Also, I want to discuss, so there was a brand new movie that was entirely written by AI, and it was protested at its premiere, and the theater pulled it. So, more censorship going on.
Yeah,
more censorship.
They were like, we're going to learn, grow, and do better after we've heard your concerns.
What that means is they're going to stop telling you they're using it, and that's what's going to happen.
Well,
so,
yes.
We got that. We got a bunch of other stuff. So if you guys are ready, we can just get right into it. Mary, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Matt.
My body is ready. Yes.
He's ready to go.
For more nourishing content.
Stop using that
and
word.
And yummy information.
Yummy doesn't yummy only bothers me when you use it in conjunction with nourishing when you're a weirdo food, what would the word for it be?
A nutritionist?
No, it's they're food fascists. That's what they are. I'm going to use the word because I'm going to complain about it in the next segment. And they want to tell you how to eat, and then they yell at you and they use the word nourishing and yummy, and I hate it. But I digress. Let's get back into it. First things first, ladies and gentlemen, I saved a reaction for this one today. They released the trailer. I guess this is the second teaser trailer for the upcoming Penguin series. It's going to be coming out on HBO Max. This is, of course, from the Matt Reeves Batman universe. I would like to know, first of all, before we watch this, what were your thoughts on the Matt Reeves Batman?
I liked it.
You liked it?
I mean, it was good for what it was. I don't understand how it fits into the larger scheme of things, though.
Well, it doesn't. It's its own universe.
Yeah, I get that. But, you know, now that James Gunn is in there and he's kind of directing the entire DC universe, he's got his own plans for Batman. Yeah. So we're in a weird situation where we have competing Batmans out here.
I mean, I was okay with that with Superman on TV. I know they always work to avoid that with Batman.
But it's not TV, though. It's two different film franchises that are both going to cross over into TV.
And I don't know, like if I had to bet, and again, I'm sure that there have been articles that I've missed about this that probably explain it better, but my guess is that Bruce Wayne will appear, but not Batman. So maybe Robert Pattinson does a he's in there for, like, they fly him out for like 30 seconds. He films one scene.
I think that they more than likely signed a contract that, you know, guaranteed them a second movie and a TV show, and so they're just playing out the contract.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Let's go ahead and watch this trailer for Colin Farrell is once again unrecognizable in this, which is fantastic. So let's go ahead and take the actress who I had not seen before. Apparently she was in Wolf of Wall Street, is a charisma vacuum.
You think?
Yes, compared to Michael Kelly and Clancy Brown and Colin Farrell and the other actors that are in there, every line of dialogue she released sounded like she choked to get it out. I mean, it could be how the audio editing is done. Obviously, they cut up a lot of audio for trailer purposes, so it doesn't flow the way it might when it's delivering, but it was bad to me.
The thing that gets me about this is that if they had just made it like a standalone crime drama as opposed to tying it into Batman, they probably could have gotten a lot more mileage out of this, because it looks good, right? But just the fact that, you know, it's tied to the Batman, and we don't know how that's going to go into the future. Like, is there going to be a season 2 of the Penguin? You know?
Well, that's the thing is these days. I was actually talking about this with somebody recently. It's like everyone discusses the idea of season 2 on streaming shows, but most of these, they were never designed to be that. They're limited series, and then if it does well, maybe it gets a season 2. But
yeah, it should have been marketed as a limited series to begin with.
Yeah,
right?
They're supposed to be designed to tell a singular story and then be done. Whereas on network TV, the whole point is to work towards a season 2.
Well, the question, though, becomes like, so if people know that there's like no future for the Matt Reeves Batman, right? Like, it's 2 movies and done. It's like 1 TV show and done. Are they going to want to invest their time in something that they just know that there's no future
that they're never going to see? Yeah,
exactly.
20 from Crispy Like Transport. Song of the Day is dedicated to Mary because I know she never heard this song's soundtrack. Rock Shop by Basil Polidorus. I don't know if I said that right. I definitely don't know it. You're right.
Basil was the name of the stupid new character in the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Basil Exposition.
Basil. Yeah. Like, look, like you said, it looks fine. Production value wise, it looks good. My old critique would have been, well, they're not going to get the money for the budget if they don't connect it to Batman, but that's not true anymore, because they'll just throw $200 million at just about anything these days. So maybe it would have been better to just make it its own standalone crime drama.
I mean, Leslie Headland got $180 million for her show.
Exactly. So.
I think like this is what a lot of people have been wanting from DC and Marvel content, is something with a little bit more realism and less goofiness.
I mean, DC certainly did better with that back when, you know, Nolan was in charge of the franchise of doing Batman, and I prefer that. This bothers me. I don't care what anyone says. The sign says the Falcons equal fascists.
It's barely even visible.
I don't care. Every single shot is planned and storyboarded.
I know.
That's there for a reason. Please use a word that actually makes sense there. Please use a word. Like, are they ultra nationalists? Are they like, I guess maybe they could be Gotham nationalists, where they're just really big fans of Gotham. But if that was true, I guess you could say that Falcone at the beginning of the trailer says, look what the madman did to the city. So there's a twisted logic there, I suppose. but they're not dictators.
But they're Italian, and that's what I think they're going for
Italians
here.
equal fascists.
This is a spotlight on anti-Italian bigotry.
I demand these people start using more evergreen language because in 10 years, I mean, this is what were we talking about recently? Somebody was talking about how when you tell, stories about current year, they're dated, and then all of a sudden nobody cares in 5 years. That line from the Batman that Catwoman delivers about white men will date the film.
I think that's what Christian Toto said about adding they, them pronouns in the Acolyte.
Exactly.
Same thing.
It dates your production in a horrible way. At least I feel that it does. Now, I understand that this is just a sign that's put in the background, but it's indicative of a larger problem within the industry.
Well, it's kind of like that Blue Beetle line where it's like Batman's a fascist.
That was what my tweet was. I said, I thought Batman was a fascist. So the bad guys are fascists, the good guys are fascists.
Everyone's a fascist.
Is there anyone that's not a fascist?
You're going to see an interview from Colin Farrell where he's like, I really tried to channel Donald Trump in this role.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Well, the crazy thing is during the actor strike, do you remember Colin Farrell? Like he did like that big diatribe on camera where he basically was like full-blown communist.
What did he say?
Oh, he was talking about like unions and like how like we have to basically take the rich studios and like get them to pay us what like we're worth, and it was just like this very like straight up socialist communist rant.
It is funny to think that there are at least there are some center right or right wing actors that are still members of SAG, so therefore
they have to.
They have to
be, but still part of the union. And now I've talked to people who act that are in SAG that they're always they speak it as if it's a necessary evil to the industry because it's so embedded in what they do that there's no way around it if you want to work on union projects.
Yeah, I mean, the way SAG operates, you want to be in SAG for the benefits, right? So you get your medical insurance and like, stuff like that. But for the most part, like if you're not in SAG, like you can't work in Hollywood. It's just, it's kind of like a closed system.
But you don't have to like suck their dick. Yeah. You don't have to simp for the union like that.
I can't wait for the episode of The Penguin where Batman goes after like union busters, and that'll be great. I can't wait for that.
Doesn't the show happen before the Batman movie though? No,
because what he's from what I'm assuming is he says, look what this madman did to the city, that it's taking place right after.
See, I thought he was talking about the Joker in that.
Oh, I thought he was talking about, because there was what happens at the end of the Batman, right? The city, like the city center.
The flooding.
There. So the shot here at the very beginning, if you look at this, is he says, look what this maniac did to the city, and then it shows this diner all like underwater. So I'm assuming that this is taking place after.
Yeah, they haven't been very clear. My guess was that this happened before the Batman, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well we'll have to wait and see. I'm okay with it. I don't know if you want to review this. It depends on how many episodes it is. If I turn on that first episode and that episode's 78 minutes long,
it's likely going to be.
One of the biggest things that's missing are like editors that are willing to be ruthless with material. Like there's just too much, giving themselves the reach around because they don't want to cut anything out.
Well, you know what's crazy about the difference between streaming originals and regular TV is that regular TV actually had like a format and a structure that you were required to follow. So like you had like the teaser, then you had commercial break, then you had Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and the bumper. And you had to structure them all so that, you'd get people to come back after the commercial. So you'd have like cliffhangers at certain points and stuff like that. It was a very tried and true system. And
still does.
And you came in at like the proper time. Like, so like sitcoms were like, 25 minutes or something like that. And hour-long dramas were like 45.
It's like 42 to 44 at its proper length.
And this idea that the streaming originals are more like long movies as opposed to TV shows, I think hurts it in a way because the writers, like they're not constrained by that structure, and so like it becomes a situation where nobody knows like the beats that they need to hit in order to make the show interesting. Like I know we're going to talk about the Acolyte a little bit later, but like that show, the runtimes are all over the place on that show, and it's been that way for pretty much every Disney Star Wars show as well.
Very off-putting that last episode was just 20 minutes of garbage and then 10 minutes of credits.
One of the funny things is if you watch like old network shows now that are available on like Tubi or on the Roku channel, they put commercial breaks in there, but they don't line up with where the natural commercial breaks used to happen on television shows. So it'll be like, it'll hit the beat it'll go black for a second and come back, and then like a minute later the commercial hits because they've got their own time frames as to where they put their commercials. But those were perfect for story structure and for forcing them to cut things down to reach their episode length. And a lot of times when you see things like, how often do you actually watch a deleted scene where you're like, that would have been 100% necessary. I needed that to see the story.
Well, every Zack Snyder movie.
Yes, every single one of them needs to be in the. That's why
they deleted the scene of Kilnaka getting murdered in The Acolyte for.
Well, they actually never shot it. Yeah, it was too expensive for them to shoot, so they were just like, oh, it'll happen off screen.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Even though they had $180 million.
I wonder where all that went, because like we're halfway through the season, and I'm
embezzlement. We already know this.
We're gonna get into it. So that is a Disney failure. Let's talk for at least a second about something that Disney has succeeded at recently, because we are fair. And Disney does have a hit on their hands right now, and that is Inside Out 2, which before its second weekend even comes, hit $480 million at the worldwide box office on its $200 million budget. So this thing is flying past expectations as to where it was going. And even on the $200 million budget, if we're to assume that they spent, $100 million on marketing, if you use the standard formula of like, what is it? Like it'd be 200 times 1.5. So you get a $300 million budget, right? It's going to hit profitability in the next couple of weeks, I would believe.
Rare Disney W here, unfortunately. You hate just have to see it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a sequel to a hit, so that's kind of like a no-brainer. And plus, it's summertime, and it's a children's movie. Mm-hmm. So
you would think it's a no-brainer, but they took them 9 years to get this sequel out from a hit. Why? Like, are they even thinking about this?
And
in the meantime, making Turning Red and Luca, and all this other garbage that no one watched.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna run with this one because they're gonna make a TV show based on the film.
Where, like, why? Why?
Because brand recognition, IP is king for them.
You can't make money off of a streaming show.
Well, we're gonna get into that with the Russo brothers topic.
The big thing for making this into a TV show is because Disney Plus wants to keep the subscribers they currently have, and pretty much 90% of people who subscribe to Disney Plus are subscribed to it because they want the children's programming that they can plop their kids in front of and just let them watch.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that like if they have like a big new franchise in Pixar, that they would want to try to transition that into stickability for their streaming service.
The streaming services are just giant money pits anyways that don't actually it's crazy to think that there's any type of business model that doesn't actually drive individual products towards revenue, meaning like you have the stream. So the model is that everybody has to subscribe and get everything, but there's very little in the way of statistics outside of just your watch time that tells you what's actually worth bringing things back in. But if you look at the streaming charts regularly as like the top shows that are performing, it's all repeats from network shows from 2 decades ago. Like very little of it has any staying power the way that shows that were made for network television did back in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. Seinfeld, The Office, Community.
Yeah.
Well, before the pandemic, it was a pretty profitable streaming model where you had basically like Amazon and Netflix, and these studios would license out their content. And that was very profitable. But then once they started to launch their own streamers and get like all the subscription revenue, they quickly realized it's like, oh, we have to actually create content that's going to keep people subscribed. And that's where they fell behind, because Netflix for years was taking out billions of dollars in debt in order to finance their own like original series, and they were able to cover that because their licensing deals were so lucrative.
It's funny too, because now in the last since the pandemic and people and things opening back up after the strike, like HBO Max has been licensing out like crazy again. Like
you mean Max?
I will never call it Max.
No one's ever going to call it Max.
I'm never
going
to call it Max. But the point is like you can a lot of the DC stuff is available on Netflix now, and they're licensing back out to other streamers, and I prefer that if it allows me to have less services down the line. Granted, I don't do that, and I keep most of them, but I will never have Apple TV.
You're not Sydney Sweeney.
I'm not. So I will not pirate everything.
Not pirate things.
Well, what's also funny is that the user experience on these apps, like when I log into Max is a terrible user experience. It just like you can't like restart stuff that you've been watching. It's
Peacock is the same way.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
And Amazon Prime.
But if you log into Netflix, it's like, oh, this is a good user experience.
Netflix and Hulu have the best user experiences.
I actually hate the way that Netflix autoplays things for you.
You can turn that off.
Turn that off.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
I also, this is my own, if I was the fascist in charge of running these streaming services, no single movie should ever have like a main graphic that isn't the movie's box cover. Like, I don't want to see it. Like, I saw like posters for movies that aren't the one that comes out on, you know, when it was on its DVD or on its VHS tape. You should have the most recognizable image from the movie is the one that
like they're doing this for shows too. I saw on Netflix they changed the cover of the Wednesday show to some other character and not Jenna Ortega. Like, why?
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is Netflix actually has a very robust kind of like thumbnail testing program. It's very similar to YouTube, where like basically they're constantly testing out new thumbnails that would get people to click and watch all the different shows.
YouTube just introduced that, like where you can like test out your, like you can make 3 thumbnails for your videos and it will give you analytics on which one's doing the best.
But there are actually like really in-depth studies that Netflix has released about like the different like countries and like what people respond to for like different things. It's actually really interesting.
The algorithm.
Because I was I was watching Kiss the Girls with Morgan Freeman, his Alex Cross movie, and there's a lot of movies like that from that time period. Think of like Crimson Tide or The Hunt for Red October, which have these really iconic covers where even if you never saw the movie, you were too young when it came out, you likely remember it from walking through the video store. And so it's like ingrained in your head as to what it looks like. At least with the old movies, they should stick with the old covers for those.
Yeah.
Well, there's this concept of image blindness. You know, I know you guys did this thing about time blindness a while back, but there's this thing where like once you get accustomed to like an image, you kind of ignore it. So like if you're familiar with a movie's like original art, switching it up will make you pay attention to it again.
Weird. It would never do, like, somehow it disassociates me from it. I'm like, because we live in there, I'm like, is that a remake? Is that a reboot? Did they like, is that like a documentary on it? I have no idea. I'm not clicking on this shit.
Yeah, I find it more confusing. I know that a lot of you guys in the chat said that you went to see Inside Out 2 and you liked it and you liked the original as well. I understand that because, you know, I watched the first one and it was okay. But I just hate this and the fact that it's doing well because of the response to it and the reasons why it's doing so well, the reasons why it's popular.
Neurotic women and emotions.
That and like mental health awareness discourse for children especially. And then I found out that the PDF files really showed themselves and went mask off after this came out.
Do I have to click on this?
Yeah, I would prefer for you to. This person posted an image of Riley, the protagonist, and said, "Y'all cannot convince me Riley from Inside Out is straight. Girl has Maya Hawke inside her head, who plays anxiety." And someone responded to say, "I just know somewhere in her head she wanted to smell the panties inside that locker."
The internet is a horrible place.
Is Maya Hawke a lesbian?
I have no idea.
I don't know, but
that's Ethan Hawke's daughter.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think she is.
Regardless, I don't think that we should be, you know, having a discourse about whether this 12-year-old in a movie, this like fictional 12-year-old in a movie is a lesbian.
Yep.
Why is this happening?
This and stan culture are the worst parts of the internet.
And this is a movie supposedly for children, but is doing better with millennial women than anyone. That's why I hate that it's rising in popularity so much.
Well, I think because you did mention that like the first one came out like what 9 years ago.
Yes.
So like a lot of like the children who watch this thing are now, you know, older, and so like they're like, oh, I like that movie when I was a kid.
Growing with your audience,
exactly,
which we talk about all the time.
You know, that would make sense if there were maybe like a 5-year time jump, but this took us from 11-year-old Riley to 13-year-old Riley in a space of 9 years. And now all of these adults are expecting the next one is going to be her in high school where she's like hooking up with people and like
by the time it's done,
make it into a sexuality thing. And then they're talking about like make one of her being a you know, an adult in her 40s and then make one of her in the nursing home, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, this is a children's franchise.
Yeah, but I mean, this goes back to the inherent problem with Disney, which is basically like they sexualize everything, whether it's for kids or family or like whatever. And that's one of the reasons why they've been getting such a backlash from parents, I think, is just because like everything has to be sexual, everything has to be racial, everything has to be about DEI. And it's
depressing.
It's really sad.
But I didn't watch the sequel so far, so I don't know if that was actually injected into the plot or the dialogue. That's just what everyone is interpreting from it so far.
Let's move on to something that maybe perhaps will make you feel a little bit better. Spaceballs.
There's a
Thoughts?
Spaceballs sequel coming up.
Part 2
at Amazon.
Yes.
And I just thought this was interesting because, you know, you're releasing a Star Wars parody in an age where no one likes Star Wars anymore. When the original came out at the time where there was still a goodwill around the franchise. And what are they going to do with that?
Well, first of all, it needs to be called Spaceballs: The Search for More Money.
And will Rick Moranis be in it?
No.
No? He's still retired?
Yeah.
He was supposed to come back, and then he got beat up in New York, and then he never came back to acting.
I don't know. Like after his wife died, he basically just said, "I'm just going to focus on taking care of my kids."
But he was supposed to make a comeback like a couple of years ago, and then like nothing happened.
I don't know, but we got Josh Gad instead.
Yeah. So thoughts on this? Is this going to make money?
Is he going to be like, I don't know, Helmut Wren or something like that?
It's like, well, it's kind of like we were talking about this before. So she was saying that, like, how do you make Star Wars parody in the age where nobody likes Star Wars?
Where actual Star Wars is a parody of itself. But, like, how do you even do that?
Well, I think that basically, like, you just make fun of everything that they've been doing wrong.
Okay.
But they're not going to dare do that. There's no chance.
I don't know. Mel Brooks, he doesn't give an F anymore. Like he's just like, hey, I'll do whatever I want. But I think that especially with the sequel trilogy, like there's a great way to lampoon that going forward. I'm just not a big Josh Gad fan. I don't think he's very funny. But you know, if he's willing to, you know, be irreverent and you know, make fun of some of this stuff, I think that it could be interesting. I mean, look at what Matt and Trey did with South Park.
Yeah. Well, people said the same thing when The Orville came out, and you know, how do you parody Star Trek when Star Trek is also at that time?
Well, you also had Galaxy Quest. Too.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see. My dad loved Spaceballs, so we'll have to wait and see. All right. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on House of Dragon season 2?
So I watched the first episode and I liked it. The first season was a lot of setup, and now it seems like we're hitting the ground running into the actual war. So I've been enjoying it. I'm a big George R.R. Martin fan. I've been like a long-suffering book lover.
Well, you think that book will come out before you die? No. See, I have I have a conspiracy theory about this. I think that it's done, and he just doesn't want to subject himself to the public opinion about it, so it's gonna release after he dies.
It's not done. I know a lot of people who know him, and basically, like, I was one of those guys who, after Storm of Swords, I waited for 5 years to read Feast for Crows, and I waited for 7 years to read The Dance with Dragons, and now I'm just convinced that, like, he's enjoying life so much that he just doesn't care about finishing it. And so, like, he's
busy writing on his blog.
Yeah.
Oh, blog. He also owns like a movie theater, and he's a big NFL fan. He loves to travel, and so like he can't write when he's traveling, and so like the amount of time that he actually sits down and writes is so minuscule compared to all the other stuff he's doing. And plus, like, he's making so much money just like letting people interpret his own work that there's really no incentive for him to like finish the book. He just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen. See, I still like my theory though. It's just done. He just doesn't want to know what people think of it. So like when he dies, it'll come out.
J.K. Rowling, on the other hand, is not going to have anybody interpreting her work for her.
No, well, I mean, that's what I like about her, right? It's the iron fist that she ruled over the movies with. But that was back in the early 2000s.
Well, George had a huge falling out with Benioff and Weiss.
Yeah, for the last 2 seasons, right?
Yeah, like it was one of those things where basically like he kicked them out of his house when they came to like meet with him and stuff like that. And it was because of all the changes that they made. And he was like, this isn't what I have planned. And they were like, we don't care, because they thought that they were the reason that the show was successful instead of like his original source material.
It's the level of hubris.
But if you look at House of the Dragon, so House of the Dragons is kind of based off of a book that is more of like a historical novel as opposed to like an actual fictional narrative. And so they're able to play with a lot of stuff that, you know, Benioff and Weiss really couldn't. So I think Brian Condell, is that his name? Brian Condell, the showrunner. I think that he's doing a lot of interesting stuff with this show.
Ryan Condal.
Ryan, whatever.
I wanted to bring this up because Olivia Cooke recently did a press interview for House of the Dragon, and she talked about an animalistic sex scene that was, quote, messy as F, and disagreed when it got cut for lacking character development.
I do like the idea that there's people over there that are like, look, these sexy, like all of the incest in Game of Thrones, like it's character development.
Yeah, of course. It's necessary for the plot. Yes. But Ryan Condal cut that sex scene and she described it as messy as F. It wasn't beautiful, and that was really fun to do. I think Ryan said we weren't learning any more about the characters, which I disagree with slightly, but it's okay. It's his show. And they also bragged about how they have an intimacy coordinator on set.
I mean, I know your feelings on sex scenes in general. I do like the idea of a director at least asking questions about things like, Jesse Ventura, I'm just asking questions. He's asking questions. He's like, does this need to be there? Now, a lot of times I always wonder, like, with the budgets being what they are with Hollywood now, again, script editors feel like they're in short supply these days, and so much ends up getting cut after being produced that the budgets balloon and then they don't know where to go from there. And I would like to see more harsh editing done in the script writing phase so that they can kind of trim these budgets down on things.
I also think that this is an evolution, because under the Benioff and Weiss regime, like, they would just throw softcore porn in there just because it was like, oh, like we can. And with this, what this is telling me is that the writers of this show are basically saying, like, hey, does this need to be in here?
And Matt Smith has even said that he thinks that it's too gratuitous at times too.
Yeah.
Right.
And Henry Cavill also said the same thing when he was doing The Witcher, and it's like, do I really need to be shirtless in a bathtub again?
Right. Right. But he did it. He pushed back, but he did it.
The guys got, like, not a lot of guys will push back on stuff like that, because it is the case du jour with most TV these days. If there's, if they're going to cast attractive men, they're going to do that. That's just the way it is. And it's funny because there's just no pushback for that, because it's just men are just expected to do that, and it's fine. There's a reason why all the Marvel dudes would be like working out right before filming scenes. Have you ever heard that story of like they'd be filming a big scene and like Anthony Mackie would be standing next to Chris Evans, who'd be standing next to all these dudes, and they'd all be like working out right before going and filming a scene. The famous scene in Winter Soldier. It's Winter Soldier, where Cap grabs the bar and then he grabs the helicopter and he pulls the helicopter back. He was like literally doing bicep curls 10 minutes before he shot the scene so that it would pop on camera.
I mean, that goes back to Ricardo Montalban in Star Trek 2, where he would do like 50 push-ups before like filming a scene,
Yeah. Get the pump.
Got to get the pump going on there. The thing that interests me most about this article is this notion of the rise of the intimacy coordinator, because this is something that I heard from there was this Apple TV show called C, starring Jason Momoa, and I'd heard that they were using intimacy coordinators on that show, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And I think that was like a COVID era thing that has kind of like carried on into like
intimacy coordinators. You think they were in the COVID guidelines?
No, they weren't in the COVID guidelines, but they started being used around that time.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting to me because, like, going back, like, it was just like, oh, we don't need intimacy coordinators. But now with like the whole like Me Too thing and stuff like that, they've started hiring these people to make sure like everything's kind of above board, I guess.
Which is odd, because for the vast majority of Me Too accusations, it doesn't say this happened to me on set with a bunch of cameras filming it, because then that would mean you have evidence. We never heard that. Really, it was mostly hotel rooms, other things.
But I look at intimacy coordinators as basically a CYA thing for the studios, where basically like an actress can't say, oh, I felt taken advantage of, or someone like unconsensually did something to me, or like whatever. So like they have someone there to kind of basically oversee these things to make sure that the studios aren't going to get sued,
right,
down the line. And it's more about that than it is about mental health, or like actually like making the actors feel comfortable, even though I think that is a part of it.
It's liability protection. It's absolutely. HR reps, basically glorified HR.
All right. Okay, I want to talk about this thing from Simon Pegg because I was taught. So recently I was talking to someone about the budget of Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible, which is going to be, they were pushing back and saying that it's not $300 million. Now I'm hearing the budget is more than $300 million. And Simon Pegg said that was incorrectly reported, but then another article was published just last week saying that no, that was correct. I don't know about all that, but I do know that Simon Pegg is calling the Godzilla films in America cultural appropriation. What I find funny about that, it's kind of like what I was saying about the Penguin thing. You know, not every word needs to be used for every description. You could just call them bad. You don't have to call the American Godzilla movies cultural appropriation because it kind of downplays how important licensing agreements and the way entertainment is a global market enterprise now. It's not like we only tell stories just from here. We tell lots of stories from other places. That's normal, okay? And I think it's funny because his point is good. He's saying go watch Godzilla -1 instead.
Right.
But saying to do so for cultural appropriation is stupid.
He said it's rock'em sock'em effing cultural appropriation. Godzilla X Kong.
He goes a step further. He's like, you can't watch Godzilla -1 dubbed. You have to watch it, in the original language.
He's a sub versus dub dork.
Well, I think first of all, I would like to know how he defines cultural appropriation. Because like, if you go out to a Chinese restaurant and eat Chinese food, are you culturally appropriating your meal?
There are people who believe that.
Yeah, I know.
There are people who believe that.
I want to know like how far down the cultural appropriation rabbit hole he goes, because I remember a time when Simon Pegg was cool. Simon Pegg is not cool anymore. He's someone who attacked the Star Wars fans. He's someone who's attacked the Star Trek fans. He's basically like he's in the Hollywood inner circle now, and he doesn't seem to be the type of person who actually cares about fandom like he used to.
Yeah.
Like he seems like an elitist snob now.
We've got a crisis party, essentially, from Scotty Dub.
Thank you.
He said,
Scotty Dub.
"Oh, wow, my man, Mr. Kadish, is in West Virginia. You're only a 2+ hour drive away from your buddy along the Potomac. Thanks to Brett and Mary for making this happen. Remember, Matt, it's hot here, but hey, it's a wet heat."
It is hot as hell out today too.
Yes.
It's very hot out here.
I was trying to explain this when I was back home in Minnesota. Like, it's just not the same type of heat there than it is here, and it was hot there, but it's just worse here.
Well, even coming from Vegas, it's like a dry heat.
Yes.
So like it's hot, but you don't feel uncomfortable in the heat. Out here, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, Simon Pegg, again, what I like about Simon Pegg is he's proof. I use the description. I say Hollywood isn't always necessarily looking for the best looking or ugliest people. They're looking for people with an interesting affect or an interesting face. Simon Pegg has an interesting face. He does. That's one of the things, like, when I see him, I'm like, he looks like somebody who fits a certain role. Thank you!
Thank you.
And can be put on camera for that reason.
He should not have bleached his hair like that. That does not look good on him.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
You gotta dance. I can't dance. All right. Guys, now that we're through the first crisis party, so I want to talk about budgets in Hollywood. We talk about it all the time because they are getting out of control. Certainly in streaming right now, it's getting worse than ever. The Acolyte has a budget of $180 million. If you remember Secret Invasion, and I'm guessing you don't because nobody watched it, had a budget of $200 million. Mind you, both of those are 8-episode series.
Insane.
And Electric State from Netflix is now being reported to have a budget of over $300 million, and this is a movie from Netflix. Okay, this is crazy because me and we talked about this on Twitter. You said, why do they keep giving the Russo brothers money? Look, Mary hated The Gray Man. I said The Gray Man was fine but forgettable.
No, it was terrible.
But Citadel,
Thank you.
Citadel, which they produced, is even worse, in my opinion.
Well, do you know the story behind Citadel?
Mm-mm.
So basically, the Russo brothers were producing that show, and they spent something like $200 million making an 8-episode season that was basically unwatchable.
Yeah.
Because they just farmed it out. Like, they didn't actually care to oversee it. And Amazon was like, we can't show this. And so they had to come back for an extra $100 million and reshoot it into a 6-episode series.
Unbelievable.
Which ended up, I think it got up to like $600 million for like that show or something like that.
They're writing blank checks for this stuff. There's a $20
from Culture Casino. Great seeing Mr. Kadish on today. Kadish, learn to chair dance. dance.
Yeah, you have to dance when the crisis parties are going. So
you did a little bit.
You get used to it. Look, this is like, it's one thing to talk about movie budgets, because we were talking about the fact that what is going on right now with movies like Mission Impossible, where the last one had an exorbitant budget, but a lot of that had to do with COVID protocols. Fine. Whatever. The budgets are out of control in Hollywood. And it's one thing when we're talking about movies where there's at least a tangential number that you can look at as to what is a return on their investment. When it comes down to $320 million budgets for streaming, how do you even gauge what that brings you?
Well, I know that when it comes to Netflix, they look at it in terms of watch time. So basically, if they spend $200 million on an original Netflix movie, right, they need to get something like 20 million hours of watch time out of it in order for it to be worth the investment.
So they actually have a metric.
They do.
Okay.
They do.
So 20 million hours of watch time equals a good return on investment?
I don't know if that's the exact number, but I know that when Red Notice came out, that movie with Ryan Reynolds, The Rock, and Gal Gadot, like they were talking, I think Netflix's CEO was talking about how they gauge whether or not it was a good investment. Mm-hmm. And basically, the longer that they can keep people watching stuff on the platform, the better the investment pays off for them. So if they're spending $300 million on this Russo brothers movie, they need to get at least like 30 to 300 million watch hours out of it or something like that. And something crazy.
And it's always these sci-fi epics that they're doing right now. And my tweet, which was very snarky, which I basically said, Netflix is farming out, is giving the Russo brothers $320 million so that you can order DoorDash and scroll on Instagram while not watching this before promptly memory holing it.
Well, the reason that the Russos are in such high demand is because of the success of like Endgame and Infinity War and stuff like that.
And the Captain America, and the last two Captain America movies.
Yeah, but I mean, but before then, they were just kind of like these plug and play directors.
They did like Agent Carter episodes.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And also I think they did Arrested Development as well or something like that. But when it comes to what they've been doing post their Marvel stuff, like long after Endgame and things like that, they've just been kind of celebrated as these like auteurs, these wonderful filmmakers, and people have just been giving them these unlimited budgets. And they keep messing it up. Mm-hmm. I don't think Gray Man was like a big hit for Netflix.
They tried to tout the numbers on it, but that disappeared fairly quickly.
Citadel was a huge boondoggle for Amazon, and now like with something like this, I think I read somewhere that basically the head of Netflix's like original development has been like replaced specifically because of this movie, because everyone's like, what are we spending all this money on?
Yeah.
It's like, can't the Russos, like, as producers at least, like rein in their budgets to something reasonable?
I'm guessing it has to do with the cast for this film, which is massive, and they're all pretty much all names you've heard of. Millie Bobby Brown, Chris Pratt, was it K.I. Kwan? Giancarlo Esposito, Anthony Mackie, Stanley Tucci, Jason Alexander. What?
And Brian Cox.
And all names that you've heard of. Those are not cheap actors to get.
Yeah, but other than Chris Pratt and Anthony Mackie, maybe to a certain extent, like you're not looking at actors who are pulling in like, $20 million payday or something like that.
I mean, Millie Bobby Brown is going to be there eventually with the demand that she has through.
Eventually, but like I don't even think that she's making like over like 8 figures and like
You don't think Brian Cox is pulling those numbers?
No, like if anything,
Chris Pratt is a movie star.
Well, I mean, like under $10 million in terms of like salary and stuff like that, most of these people don't fall into that category. Like Chris Pratt definitely like probably around 20 million. Anthony Mackie maybe around 15 million.
Bro, if we're talking Jason Alexander, we're talking Seinfeld Jason Alexander.
Yeah, but he's
right?
not a draw.
No, but my point is like if I'm Jason Alexander and I'm getting the royalties from Seinfeld, I'm not getting out of bed for less than $20 million. Are you kidding me?
Well, Millie Bobby Brown could say the same.
For something like this, the visuals are going to cost a fortune. And it's funny because somebody's like, I wish they would have made this into a series. I'm like, if it costs $320 million to make this as a movie, imagine what it would cost to then have to do the same level of post work for an 8-episode series or a 6-episode series.
And because it's Netflix, I wonder how woke it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, like. We'll have to wait on the storytelling from I never thought of their movies. Like Citadel, I thought was unwatchable. And I thought
that's Amazon.
Priyanka, but I'm talking about the Russo brothers in general. Like Priyanka Chopra was unwatchable in that. I liked her in Quantico. I actually did like the first season of Quantico, but that show was unwatchable for the most part.
She's a Jonas, isn't she?
Yes, she is. She's married to one of the Jonas Brothers. And then, but Gray Man was inoffensive, just not very entertaining. It didn't have a whole bunch of social messaging.
Well, they changed so much from the source material. I remember when that movie came out, and the author of the book that it was based on.
Didn't like it?
It's not that he didn't like it, like he wasn't going to go out and badmouth it, but he was basically like, yeah, this is kind of like its own thing. It doesn't really follow my book.
One of my biggest pet peeves was like very early on in the film. There's like an interstitial shot where they show one of the characters grabbing like a go bag with money, and it's very clearly fake money. Like they don't even work to hide the fact that it's literally, because it's like 4K TV.
It's literally this.
The shot is like this.
Copy money right there.
It literally is. It's the same thing. So and then it's like a close up shot of it, and it's like if you pause it, it just says copy money right on the like they used to be pretty good about finding ways to hide shots like that. Put a money clip around it or something. Like it was bad.
Also the fact that Chris Evans was wearing loafers the entire movie
and doing his best like Ace Ventura impression.
What type of a bad guy wears loafers?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I tried to block all of that out of my memory.
Tassel. He could have been wearing tasseled loafers. Could have been worse.
No socks.
He wasn't wearing socks.
Yeah, that's very Miami Vice villain right there. Early Miami Vice. That would be good. How do you fix the budgets in Hollywood? If it were up to you.
If it were up to me?
Yeah.
Well, you'd have a producer who actually knows how to rein in all the creatives.
Yeah.
Essentially, like the Russos are. They delegate, right? Like they're not kind of involved in the day-to-day. They just use their names to get stuff off the ground. And then they hire people who seem to be completely incompetent to handle things for them on the day-to-day. And that stuff just goes out of control. But I also think, going back to stuff like The Acolyte, where we were talking about where did that $180 million go for these episodes, because they look cheap as hell.
Yes.
So like the question then becomes like, okay, do you have a competent producer who can actually like rein in the spending and make sure that everything that needs to be shot can be shot within like a reasonable cost structure? Yeah. And honestly, like Netflix has never been good about being tight with their budgets. Like they just kind of like throw money everywhere. Same thing with Amazon.
The answer is to just raise the subscription prices on everybody else so that we have to take the hit for their bad decisions. And I'm pretty confident that they're gonna make it like 3+ hours long to inflate the watch time and justify the price.
Well, this also goes back to like Hollywood budgeting, right? Where, it used to be the most expensive movie ever made was like Titanic for like $100 million, right? And people were like, how can you spend $100 million on a movie and expect
and that
it
was
to be profitable?
I guess to be fair, that was in what, 97? Yeah. So that $100 million in 97 is far more now.
But if you go back to the 80s, like most movie budgets were like $30 million, right? And when I was working in Hollywood, there was this thing where Hollywood either wanted to do extremely low budget movies, like $1 million or less, or extremely high budget movies, which was like, $60 million or more. There was no room for like mid-level budget movies, simply because the profit margins just, like the money laundering wasn't there, right?
What I always say is like we could use like a Tony Scott today who does the $60 million movie, but by today's standards, $60 million movie when Tony Scott was making them was a high budget. But I would love to, if Tony Scott were still alive, to see Tony Scott still making movies for $60 million now.
Well, there's a lot of bloat in these movie things, like a lot of union dues, a lot of stuff that like that could easily be cut out but can't be cut out simply because it's contractually like in there, which is why I think AI is so interesting and why Hollywood's so scared of AI, is because AI could easily replace a lot of the stuff and cut the budgets dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to wait and see, but I can never imagine. I've been saying a lot recently is like, look, market cap, no movies over $100 million for 10 years. Like just as an experiment, as a studio, be like, look, we're going to throw $100 million at these movies. That way, when they fail, which a lot of them will, because people have no faith in the public right now, it lessens your, the pain that you feel from that failing. But the three biggest movies last year, which were Super Mario Brothers, Oppenheimer, and Barbie, all cost $100 million to make. If they had failed, that's a far smaller investment than what happens when you spend 300. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy was like the fourth biggest, or in that realm of biggest movies of the year, but cost $250 million to make. So the $860 million the movie made meant that they took almost none of it home.
But just look at like the Angel Studios, A24, and Blumhouse model. It's like you're making movies between $10 and $30 million, and they're making insane amounts of profit.
Yeah.
Like even if like you can't say like, oh, like they hit $100 million at the domestic box office, they've still made their money back and then some.
Yeah.
And so like I'm like, why doesn't Hollywood make more of these like lower tier movies and then do like one big box office extravaganza a year or something like that?
Does it have to do with how many slots they have for, they want to put more into it because there's only so many slots at the theaters that year?
No, I think that it's mostly just an ego thing where it's like, you know, every movie we put out has to hit $1 billion or something like that.
It's the self-importance.
Yeah. Well, I want to see them rein the budgets in, because I think that if you put even if it's a governor of your own making on yourself, you'll find the need to be creative more implicit, and then you can get away from, for example, why Victoria Alonso was fired, because there was no actual planning going into the way that they were doing their CGI. If you force them to actually do better previs and actually go on location to film rather than building complete 3D set, green screen sets where it all looks like slop, and then you get a director like Gareth Edwards who makes the creator look way better for $80 million than Disney seems to be able to do with everything else they're doing, spending $200 million on things. If you force them to think about it by not giving them endless resources, you might find the creativity to actually kick back in.
Also, personally, I just think there's a lot of money laundering going on with these movies.
There you go.
Like they'll say like, oh, we're spending $300 million on a movie, but like $150 million of that comes back to Netflix or something like that because they're using Netflix's, services or people or like whatever the case may be. I know that with studios that when they make a movie on a studio lot, they're basically paying themselves for like the rental of like those sound stages and stuff like that. And so it's just a way to kind of like, make that money back. And even though it's reported as part of the budget, it actually
goes back into the. I just hate it because and when people talk about why CGI looked better, it's because they were on actual locations when they did these things, and it's vastly different if you're in a physical location and there's CGI elements built on top of that, as opposed to them standing there and then everything is built around them. It's what takes you out of it, and a lot of times you can't really put your finger on why, especially if you don't care enough to actually look into that stuff.
Well, I think it does. I think another thing with that point is that it used to be that when you were doing special effects, you had to plan them out.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And nowadays, like so many studio executives, especially in Marvel, like at the last minute, they're like, hey, let's change this, or like, let's do this.
We want 6 versions of this.
And so they don't have enough time to actually make it look good before it has to be like released. Like I know Thor Love and Thunder was like a big like issue with that. But it used to be like, like with like Avengers Endgame, for instance, like they had like literally years to like get all the special effects ready to go for like that type of thing.
In the chat, somebody says, Brett, are you going to watch the sequel to Twister? Yes, I am. Okay.
Twisters.
I changed my mind. At first, I thought it was stupid. I still think it's stupid, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't care if there's a ton of climate propaganda in it. I'm going to watch it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I want to see the 2 cows get thrown around. It's going to be a lot of fun.
There was a lot of climate propaganda in the first one, too.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. All right. Yeah, but it was different back then.
What do you guys think of Glenn Powell?
Mary? Thoughts
Me?
Thoughts on Glenn Powell?
I don't know. I mean, he's inoffensive. I don't really mind him either way. He seems like a movie star type of guy.
Yes. I think that he's about the closest thing you have to like the modern day up-and-coming movie star.
I saw a tweet which I thought was kind of funny where it's like Glenn Powell is only where he's at today because Armie Hammer started eating people.
Are they the same age? I suppose they're about the same age.
Well, they're kind of like the same style of actor, I think. Like just like the good-looking pretty boy who's like, very good at delivering lines.
Yeah, he's good enough. Like for instance, Glenn Powell in Anyone But You looks fantastic because Sydney Sweeney is so bad at acting. It makes him look like he's, he's cinema.
Well, did you guys ever watch Scream Queens?
I never watched Scream Queens.
I did, actually.
So Glenn Powell played Chad Radwell on Scream Queens, and he was the best part of that show.
I didn't remember that, but it was brought up on my timeline. I was like, wait, he was in that?
Yeah, he was Chad Radwell, I've been a fan of his since then. Yeah.
But he was in Hitman, which I really enjoyed, and I think that movie played to his strengths as an actor, and I think that he's the type of dude. Him and Sydney Sweeney are the examples of the actors who seem to be doing the industrious side of the industry, meaning that they're picking their roles very specifically.
Well, in Glenn Powell's case, like he's actually producing a lot of the stuff that he's working in.
And she's looking to be doing that as well. I mean, that she got very involved with everything going on with Anyone But You. She worked very hard to get Immaculate made and stuff like that. Yeah. They're not just taking roles and doing whatever.
Do you guys find it's weird that like she was the only one who really capitalized off of Hollywood's biggest disaster, which was Madam Web. It's like the most successful failed movie ever made.
It's because her image already leans into it being bad, whereas Dakota Johnson gets hurt from something being bad because she takes herself too seriously.
I actually think like nobody knew who Sydney Sweeney was, at least in like the comic book sphere, because like she was only on what was it, Euphoria on HBO, and I don't think most
White
people,
Lotus.
I don't think most people watch that stuff. But now like you have all these like young male comic book guys who like see her in Madam Web and they're like, oh wow, she's hot, and then they start following her on social media.
Well, they like teased this part of the movie where she's in costume, and it was like 0.5 seconds of the movie, as it turned out. But she openly admitted that she only did it so that she could meet people at Sony.
That's awesome. I would rather an actress or actor said that than pretend like they care about the material. Rather than lying and being like, oh, I read comic books growing up. No, it's a job, and that's fine. I don't care.
Well, what gets me is Dakota Johnson actually thought it was a Marvel movie.
Yeah. Well, it's her agent's fault. She was like, you can be in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, she fired her representation like after that movie came out. I was like, how do you not know this stuff?
Do like 2 seconds of research on Google, girl.
All right, what would you like to see? Cringe or cue to the day?
You decide.
Cringe first? All right, we'll start with cringe. Mary found this one. She didn't preface, so it can't be that bad.
It's a TikToker with multiple personalities.
Of course. Here we go. Let's watch this.
Hi, I'm Bunny.
Hey, I'm Z. What's up? Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hey everybody, I'm Ben. Hey, I'm Elliot. Wow!
Wait, that didn't even sound like Elliot.
Sorry. Hello there, I am Malachi. What's up?
Hi, I'm Echo. Hi, I
love that they all have special pronouns.
Eliza Dushku is Echo and
is J.
Hey everyone, I know I look like shit, but it's red. Hi. Hey everybody, my name's Sayori. Yo, I'm Beatrix. What's up? Hello everyone, my name is Ophelia.
It just keeps going. How does it just keep going?
It's satire, right? It's gotta be satire.
No, I don't think it is, because there are actual like multiple personality disorder influencers who make videos like this, like interviewing their multiple personalities. So
it's depressing.
I don't know.
It's depressing. All right. Let's move on then. I've got cue to the day.
Well, one of them is just randomly British too.
Yes. This one here is from John. Says left to right. Gretchen, Richard, and Arya. Victoria in the front. Don't let the cuteness fool you. They can be demons, especially the little one in front. She runs the house.
Oh, look at that! I love Cavalier. They're so cute.
That is a cute dog. That is a very cute dog. Got any pets?
The tricolor.
Yes.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
I love dogs.
There we go. Let's do one more here. This one.
The other one is still playing.
It's still playing. Hold on. Mute. There we go. All right. This is from Ellen Thompson. Says, my Great Dane pup, Jackie, is not quite a year old. Absolutely crazy for this ball. Wow. That is
I think we already...
Did we already see this one?
Did this one.
This one? Sometimes they get doubled up.
Thought so.
Let's do one more. Terrence Rice. More of Milky, a.k.a. crazy girlfriend meme. Highlights include geeking out on catnip and being a weirdo.
Let me see. Oh.
That is a cute cat.
A four-eyed cat. Love that.
That is a cute cat.
Aww.
Oh, it is out of its mind on catnip there.
Yeah.
It's just covered in it.
You want to hear something weird?
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, you know how TikTok, like their algorithm's always trying to serve you the stuff that like you're supposedly the most interested in. Well, lately, all the videos I've been getting on TikTok are about dachshunds.
Okay.
And I'm like, at no point did I ever tell TikTok that I was interested in dachshunds, but every single video I get is about dachshunds now. It's very
Definitely
strange.
could be worse.
Yeah.
You were just telling me about your Instagram Explore page earlier.
Yes, I have a clean Instagram Explore page. Mine is fine.
Totally not sus.
It is not sus. If you look at it, it's perfectly fine.
Animals. You said baseball.
Skating.
Things like that. Skating.
Yeah. Yep. It's good. All right, let's go ahead. Now that we're an hour into the show, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the real business. It's time to talk about James O'Keefe. So if you guys follow this channel or you follow anything to do with pop culture, we have a lot of criticisms of Disney, whether it's the movies, the television shows, Bob Iger. All of that stuff is very, very relevant. Well, it's making its way into mainstream politics, obviously. And James O'Keefe, of course, is an investigative journalist, and he is exposing the anti-white agenda going on over at Disney. And like I said, everybody else who's in the know is like, first time.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell just by watching the content that they put out that this is what's going on, but maybe this is our weapon against gaslighting.
Yeah.
When you tell a normie about these things, they're like, oh, come on, you're just making this up.
Yeah.
But now we have the proof, and they got the James O'Keefe treatment, and they just make it so easy, don't they? Like, it's like the meme, I swear I'm not going to expose my company for breaking the law. Yeah. One glass of wine into my Hinge date. Also, so we actually are breaking the law.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that not only is Elon Musk kind of signal boosting this stuff when he like quote tweets it, but the fact that like we have a platform like X, formerly known as Twitter, that just allows stuff like this to get out. And, you know, this is something that no other news organization would ever like cover. But the fact that it's out there and more people are realizing that if you want like up-to-date, accurate news, like you go to X, you don't go to CNN or Fox News or anything like that. Like stuff like this starts getting like more and more boosted. I think that's one of the big reasons why we're seeing such a huge dip in Biden's poll numbers is because truth is getting out now as opposed to before where it could be like blanket censorship. And what James O'Keefe is doing, while important, when he was doing Project Veritas, like that stuff would get shadow banned and like you know and suppressed and stuff like that. And so even though he was doing important work, it wasn't getting the reach it needed to actually be effective. Whereas now anyone who follows Elon Musk, which is pretty much everyone on Twitter, like they're seeing this stuff.
Yeah, I think Elon, it was only like 4 months ago we did a video about this. Elon posted supposedly like insider information about Disney's hiring practices from a Disney employee, and they have these very complex charts about all of the different quotas that they need to reach. And I knew that America First Legal was going to weigh in on this because they actually launched a lawsuit against Disney back at that point for their discrimination against white straight males and Christians and Jews.
Also, Elon has beef with Bob Iger.
Yeah.
So let's watch the first 2 minutes of this video so you guys can get an idea.
This is Senior Vice President at the Walt Disney Company. His name is Michael Giordano.
Giordano,
yep. Not DiGiorno.
Yes, he's not the pizza.
And he thinks that he's on an innocent Hinge date, but she just keeps asking more and more questions about his job.
This is the first time that I've seen one. Like it's always the inside joke now is always that it's James O'Keefe himself on the date. And but this is not him.
Surprisingly, this man is straight.
Yes, here we go.
Certainly, there have been times where, you know, there's no way we're hiring a white male person.
Just kind of unspoken.
There are times when it's spoken, but
how would they say it?
There's no way we're hiring a white male person. They say
like straight to you, or okay.
They'd be very careful how they message.
We're gonna get copyrighted by the music that these damn people are listening to in the background.
That's agents.
According to these videotapes, Disney blatantly discriminates against white men in particular.
I think I'm sort of like well prepared for it. I'm well positioned for it. But as far as Disney's concerned, I'm a white male. And that's not who they're looking to promote at the moment.
As a white guy, even Michael has his own doubts about the possibility for advancement for himself at Disney. In fact, Michael actually got to experience Disney's discrimination against white males firsthand.
I've been at the company 11 years now, so I have friends in HR and I have friends in those divisions, and they're like, look, nobody else is going to tell you this, Mike, but they're not considering any white males for the shop. They're just not.
His facial expression.
I would love to know like how that conversation came about. They're just like in the break room and somebody just sidles up next to him. Is like, Mike, I just want to let you know.
Well, he described his job as having to do with closing deals on TV shows. Yeah. So he has to do with like the pay rates for these types of people. But I'm sure he knows a lot of the inside baseball as to how they choose the candidates and how they choose cast members. But let's get through the rest of that highlight reel.
Here we go.
They even passed over a qualified half-black person for a promotion because they didn't look black enough.
We wanted to hire somebody in the department a few years ago now who was half-black, but didn't appear half-black. And there was a creative executive who was like, we're not, that's not what's wrong. They wanted somebody in meetings who would appear a certain way. And he wasn't gonna bring that to the meeting. I mean, it kind of feels like we're at at some point there's going to be a lawsuit. That's kind of how it feels, just because of,
And that is a lawyer talking. So how does Disney explain pushing these discriminatory practices? They use code words and buzzwords.
I'm guessing that there is a acceptable code words and buzzwords that are used to explain what they're looking for. They might say something like, look, we're not looking at like the usual suspects for this job. So it's like not like a legally actionable thing, but everybody knows what it means. They, for writers and actors, we hear all the time, like, looking to hire writers and actors who bring diversity. I'm not looking to bring on any more clients who are white.
Okay.
The Disney tapes.
The Disney
and that's not surprising because they need to use code words and buzzwords to avoid actually getting sued or breaking the law. But we already knew that because the graphic that Elon posted supposedly from a Disney employee says in one of the footnotes, the people who are interviewing candidates for all of these positions are not allowed to ask about your racial makeup, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, and all of these things, but they're allowed to hint at it and just use their observation skills. So you're not just discriminating against white people, you're also discriminating against people who are black but are not black enough. And I just wanted to look at the part of this video talking about financial incentives for diversity because, the conversation about get woke, go broke is incredibly common. But here he is explaining in detail why they can go woke and not go broke simultaneously.
920, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go.
I think there are times when it's like so front and center. It's like great because that's the focus, Like we have so many shows where we're casting and we're like, yeah, we're not even going to see, certain people, because we need that particular role to.
So is it intentional that they want they only look for diverse candidates for certain roles?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a belief that it's just good for society and a big goal. But there's also a belief that we're going to make more money if we appeal to a wider variety of people, and it's a good thing. We have shareholders too, and so diversity helps with that.
Diversity helps with financial incentive.
Yeah.
So is it do you think it's more so on that side, or using any good prices gets put to use, or
regardless? I think the Disney would do it regardless, but I think that there are even conservative people who may not want to lean into it can easily make the argument that we make more money when we appeal to a wider variety of people, and that means diversity.
Yeah.
There's a real focus on every show. And I'm sure the movies too, though I don't deal with that side of it. Just making sure that the writer's room has a real, diversity, not just gender or sexual orientation and ethnicity, but, making sure that they're hiring some writers who may have certain disabilities where they wouldn't have been hired before. Since there's kind of a really broad look whenever we're going to
Thank you. Speaking of financial incentives.
Exactly.
But it's insane because, you don't need to, in the case of Star Wars, right, the vast majority of the people you're trying to appeal to, right, would be men and probably white men. You're not going to appeal to a wider variety of audiences by making all of the protagonists women and POCs.
Well,
that doesn't actually make sense from a monetary perspective, but they get a bailout because of their shareholders and ESG.
As Chris Gore has said, the most costly thing Disney has ever done is turning Marvel and Star Wars from boy brands into girl brands.
Yeah, because it didn't work.
Yep. Well, and it makes no sense because the whole point of buying Marvel and buying Star Wars and buying Lucasfilm is that you already had your Disney princesses, you already had your animated movies, which, you know, skewed heavily towards women and children. Now you have these brands that would appeal towards men, and theoretically that makes you a powerhouse that can appeal to all demographics. But then they like took it and then changed it. It made no sense.
Well, also, if you buy into this idea that representation matters because only people go to see things that they're represented in, if you don't have any straight white men in your movie or TV show, then straight white men aren't going to watch it.
What are they going to watch?
And that's like the biggest audience demographic out there. So like, even if you buy into like their whole definition of why representation matters, they're literally sabotaging themselves.
Yeah. And I guess they have to have a deaf screenwriter for Echo.
Yeah.
Like, is that what he meant by filling the writers' rooms with diversity of disability status, which you're also not allowed to ask people about in interviews?
And I think later on in this video, he talks about how most of the head writers, like 30% of the head writers on Disney's projects are all gay.
There's a gay mafia.
Yeah, there's a gay mafia.
And he unknowingly guessed that the population of LGBTQ people in the country is 10 to 15%, which it is not. But he has that perception because he's working around this highly disproportionate amount of gay people. He said that the screenwriters are 30 to 35% gay, and that they need to focus on like trans storylines more so than everybody else. Which is why, presumably, we're seeing that push. And
what's funny is when you work in like LA and Hollywood, like there is like this bubble there where very rarely do you get like a glimpse of like what's outside that bubble. And I think that the same as in New York, because it's just about like everyone you're hanging out with kind of like has these like beliefs and outlooks. And so when you hear that, oh, middle America doesn't have like these same beliefs, like it's almost like, how can that be? Because everyone I know shares it in, you know.
They must be monsters then. Okay, we got a 20 from Stutter Gentleman. He said, spending 20 at every podcast I find with this news. Someone can study for years to get the skills and you don't get hired, not because you're not black skinned, but because you aren't black enough. Sickening. Yeah, the craziest part, I think, of this video is him sharing an anecdote to his fake Hinge date about this this hiring candidate who was half black but did not appear to be so. I guess they call that white passing, and was then passed over for the role for that reason.
Let's watch that clip real quick. We've got that one here.
He sounds so ridiculous, by the way, like trying to weasel his way out of saying explicitly, like he ends all of his sentences like, you know, like, we don't want to hire, like, you know.
I just imagine, like, gentlemen, if you're on this date, if any woman is ever this interested in what you do.
She didn't ask me about my family or my hobbies.
She just really cared about how many people we hired at Disney that looked a certain way. I thought maybe she was a sociologist.
No, but it's so funny. They said that this guy like talked about his dating experience as well with the journalist, and he's like, yeah, like I haven't been on the dating apps before. I really haven't had any relationships that are of note. So he's just glad that he's getting a date.
I just want to know where she's wearing. Is it a button cam?
Like,
is it
this guy could have been saved by just being married at 45.
There you go.
So sad. Okay,
here we go.
Aside. Never understood that. Is it like, cause I know a lot of like I have like.
See, like I'm picturing a phone that's like propped up against a milk jug.
I think it must be like hidden in her purse.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Black friends like are not as dark as
she has a lot of black friends. She's not racist.
They care about that, or it's like the ethnicity actually.
They say they don't care about it, but the truth is, to some extent, they do. If you're mixed, right, you don't look black at all, which sometimes happens.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, I'm not so sure. But if you're mixed and you can tell somebody's part black, but they're not like that black, so okay, that was still, it's crazy.
But apparently,
Yeah.
There's actually, I think that he went on further in that clip. About
was there more?
I think that he said. I think he said something even worse.
Is black enough?
He talked about Meghan Markle.
Make this up.
Yeah.
So would like Meghan Markle, who's pretty white.
Right. Yeah.
Would she be considered?
She would still be
diverse,
She would.
Or
huh? As a white guy, even Michael has his own doubts about the possibility.
Okay.
So, I mean, he thinks that he's safe working at Disney as a white man.
They'll just come for him last, you know.
I mean,
well, actually, no. Now he's being called into the office today.
I mean, can he lose his job over this?
Oh yeah.
It was funny at the end of the Disney tape part 1. You see the teaser for the next part is James O'Keefe walks in Chris Hansen style, pulls up the laptop, and he's like, "Is this you?" He like pulls up his LinkedIn profile. He's like, "Is this you, Michael Giordano?" And then he's like, what do I do now?"
Oddly enough, what Disney should do is they should write their own like House of Cards style show where like they have their own version of Frank Underwood who then feeds information to a James O'Keefe type person to take down their competition, right?
Well, there are two things here that I kind of want to touch on. The first is that Chris Gore over at Film Threat has done a great series of investigative articles talking about like the slow decline of Disney and how like the staffing requirements have led to this kind of like internalized racism over time. And whenever you have a situation where people are hired and promoted based off of like race or gender as opposed to actual merit, you get a situation like we're in that right now with Disney, where basically like there's no creative talent at the company. Everything that they make is pretty much like terrible for the most part, with exceptions. But for the most part, the people who are in the positions of power didn't get there by merit. Like there used to be a time where you paid your dues, you worked your way up, and you got into certain positions based off of like your talent, skill, and stuff like that. That no longer exists in Hollywood. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you read the Film Threat articles, like it's actually a very interesting detailing about the downfall of Pixar, the downfall of Lucasfilm, like all these like, you know,
the loss of the actual creatives that did good work, like John Lasseter.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a 20 from Bad Comedy. He said, "I would wager the camera is just on a chick with the heavies. It'd be natural camouflage because you can't just stare looking for a camera."
That's
funny.
So you know what that means when they make a movie about this? Sydney Sweeney ends up playing the lead actress.
Must mean that her left boob is all the way on the other side of the table.
Yes, that's
Plumber sent another 20. He said, "Don't internalize racism. It will give you cancer."
I learned that from the show New Amsterdam yesterday.
Yeah.
That
Hollywood taught us
there is nothing that went like we were discussing before, like where actual wokeness exists, because I hate that word. And for the most part, with the movies, perhaps you could say that there's elements of what people would describe that word as in a lot of the crappy non-meritocratic casting that goes on these days, like where they're not bringing in the best actors and stuff like that. And you can talk about DEI and all that stuff. But if you want to know where it's been ruined, where the worst storylines are, it's television. It's network television. That's where, if you will remember, we did the story about the incel who was at the hospital
this is
like a year ago.
This is what boomers are watching.
It is, and they're
while
just,
they eat dinner.
They don't care because they don't know what's going on, and they're just like,
incel. Have you ever heard of that, honey?
The TV told me that racism gives me cancer. I gotta just not be racist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and I don't think it actually gets better for a company like Disney. I don't see. I don't know if too big to fail is necessarily a thing, but it
how
doesn't
much
seem
will it
that...
take for them to actually, have to go under a federal audit for what was just exposed?
I don't know if I don't know if there's a federal issue here. Like,
I mean, that presents a legal case for violating the Civil Rights Act.
Possibly. I'm more interested in how this is going to impact the Gina Carano lawsuit. Yeah, because like if there was ever a smoking gun that would help her out, it's this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And Elon's funding it, so he's aware of it. Definitely. I mean, it will be confusing because her lawsuit does mention gender discrimination for her being female. She's saying that her male
Pedro Pascal,
her male co-stars and colleagues got special treatment, and she has a claim of gender discrimination. But
we'll have to wait and see. All right, let's do some super chats.
Shane H. Wilder said, "Happy Friday, Brett, Mary, and Matt. An Acolyte star censored, y'all? Well, that's just rude."
That is true.
You once I should deal with them, boss. Cracks knuckles. Not yet.
We're gonna talk about it.
Cora Nelson said, "Happy Friday, Bartholomew and Matilda."
It's just rude.
Okay.
It's just rude.
Shane H. Wilder said, hey, I knew you weren't going to be able to cover the Disney tapes yesterday. You got to have time to do your homework after all. Yeah, that's how it usually goes.
Let's do one more.
One time at band camp said, if Spaceballs 2 makes fun of woke Star Wars, I'd watch it.
Okay.
Well, they're keeping the script under wraps, and Amazon isn't saying anything, so we don't know.
And see. All right, let's move on. So yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, we discussed the clapback video that Acolyte star Amandla Stenberg made. I always have to make sure that I say her first name right. It's Amandla. And after that was made, something really hit me. Like right as we were getting done with the show, I'm like, oh, I bet you this thing ends up getting us copyrighted. And lo and behold.
Yeah. I didn't think it was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But we reacted live to Amandla's stupid music video, and I thought it wasn't going to get us copyright claimed because I looked on Spotify. There's nothing on any of the streaming services, but unfortunately, this was her plan all along. When she put in her caption, you have 72 hours to respond. Mm-hmm. That was our response, and now she's trying to suppress the people who are criticizing her once again on YouTube.
The really duplicitous part of this is that, you know, because it's music, it's instantly like, you know, copyright claimable.
Uh-huh.
And so like the reason that she put out a music video was so that she could like instantly take down and hurt anyone who played the video to criticize it.
Exactly.
It's very, very like, I'd almost say dark side-ish.
It is a little bit dark side. It's a bit like the dark side. It's funny because now it'd be hilarious if this like sparks a trend where everybody, like Rachel Zegler starts releasing diss tracks every time we make a video about her. I'd actually be kind of here for it.
It's unfortunate that one interview of her from 2018 was the one of a few that went really viral when Acolyte was first starting to get pushback, because she's right, technically, that interview was not press for the Acolyte. It was for a completely different project. But people were posting it as evidence of what kind of person she is.
The same thing happened with Brie Larson with her comments from that award show. Okay,
right.
That had nothing to do with the promotion for the Marvels, but your reputation as an actor matters. And every time you get hired for a project, the casting director and the studio, your producer should be saying, what is it that you've done that can come back to bite us?
And she's using that now as a way to say, oh, all of the people hating on the Acolyte are using misinformation and they're splicing together interviews that are out of context to make me look bad. But then she's not addressing at all, first of all, the actual critiques of the show and her performance in it, which is trash. Mm-hmm. And she's not addressing the critiques of the press that she was doing for the Acolyte, calling it the gayest Star Wars ever made.
In the chat, Bird Flu C. Williams says, did it hurt Jack Reacher? Well, those interviews came out after season 2 of Reacher had already come out. The real question will be, will it end up hurting season 3? My guess is no, because I think by that time, a lot of people will forget that those things happened, and the average person doesn't spend all day on YouTube, and like this is a bubble as well.
Also, season 3 will come out long after the election, so it's just going to be one of those things where people are like, well, I like the first 2 seasons of Reacher, so I'll watch the third one. But I think he really did a bad thing to his personal brand, Alan Richardson, simply by coming out so strong. Like if you look at The Rock, right? The Rock basically said like, yeah, getting political was bad for my brand, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Yeah. And I think that's the smart move, where I really do believe that like actors should probably just keep their politics to themselves. Otherwise, they're going to alienate a huge portion of their fan base.
But a lot of them aren't taking that. The reason why I think I'm so high on the likes of Sydney Sweeney or Glenn Powell is because they seem to be taking a business approach to what they do, which means your image matters, right? And they seem to be taking that into account. If there are clips of them talking about those things, they're not super prominent. Maybe they exist. I don't know.
They were trying so hard to get Sydney Sweeney to go on a rant about Roe v. Wade in the promotion for Immaculate.
Yeah.
Because it's about basically, you know, a woman getting pregnant not by choice.
Well, what this really comes down to is that Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell both know that audience outreach is important, especially as they're on the rise. Whereas people who've already reached the pinnacles, they're like, well, I can basically do whatever I want because I'm entrenched and now like I can't hurt my career. Mm-hmm. So the people who actually put the audience first and put their fans first are going to continue to rise in popularity. Whereas the issue with Amanda Stenberg, you know, you talked about that that interview she did where she was like, you know, making white people uncomfortable. I think that was for the movie The Hate U Give or something like that.
Yeah.
And
it's about police brutality.
Yeah, but like by her saying that, like she basically alienated all the white fans that she might have, like because she,
the white fans she's looking for love comments like that because they have white guilt. But
well, this is true. But like whenever you have an actor who basically attacks the fan base or the audience, and this is something that it's a weird trend in Hollywood where like the attacking of the audience because they don't like something that you made. This was never a thing up until 2016 when Ghostbusters came out. Yeah. And this has been like a kind of tried and true strategy ever since. It's like, how dare you not like our terrible movies and TV shows? Mm-hmm. You must be racist, sexist, homophobic,
and
like whatever.
What they're saying about the Amanda Stenberg thing is that it's racism. And what I use as a gauge here is even when this was reported on by the Hollywood Reporter and Variety on their X accounts, none of them, like all of the comments, which usually will look very different from where you're getting your information from, the people commenting it will lean a certain way, and everyone's like, this has nothing to do with racism. It has everything to do with the fact that your show sucks balls.
Yeah, and you know, I actually wanted to push back on that because clearly if they chose a black Gen Z actress to be the lead character in a new Star Wars project, that is very intentional on their part, as we just covered talking about this expose, that they are trying to keep any white males out of the franchise. And that is an intentional thing that they're doing. And that should be mentioned. Like it's not an invalid critique, right? She's not representing who the main fan base is of Star Wars.
But let's just talk about the racism accusations here, right? So like if we go on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, Criticlist is a much better site than Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is at 14%.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is basically 86% of the people who've watched this show are racist because that's the reason why they didn't like it, as opposed to it just being a shitty show.
Imagine if they said that the holiday special in Star Wars has a low audience score because of racism.
Could be. You never know.
Racism against Wookiees is the reason why it has a low audience score, which it actually does have a lower Rotten Tomatoes score than the holiday special currently.
But that was a big thing with Ghostbusters 2016, which was basically like, oh, you don't like this movie because you're misogynist. You don't like women. And it's like, who doesn't like women? like there are plenty of movies out there starring women that people go to and enjoy.
Yeah.
The funny thing about it is, and they'll never admit this, but people like it when you take responsibility for something, right? So if the show doesn't do well, you gain so much more traction if you're like, look, we swung, we missed, it didn't go the way we wanted to, we'll look to do better next time. That's not a very complicated statement to make, and instantly endears yourself to even the most hateful or like the most critical of people that, watch your work.
Well, there also used to be a time in Hollywood where they actually cared about the audience because they were profit motivated, right? Yep. So they wanted to give the audience what they wanted. Whereas nowadays it's more about the message. They're message oriented. And so it's about forcing a message on an audience, whether they like it or not. And that's really what comes down to modern Hollywood issues here, which is that we're going to diversify, we're going to, create propaganda, and if you don't like it, too bad, because we're going to keep doing it until you accept it.
Yeah.
And that's just a recipe for failure, in my opinion. I think that what we're seeing here is that we're on the cusp of another independent film revolution, powered by AI, no less, where people are going to start making movies independently outside of the Hollywood system that people actually want to watch. And you're going to see a shift in the audience away from typical Hollywood fare to more independent fare, and Hollywood's not going to know how to compete.
My question will be, will Hollywood work to keep those movies out of theaters? So I feel like the landmark moment will be when some of these independent films that do use technology like that start taking up spaces at
You don't
theaters.
have to do theaters anymore, though. Like, the distribution model's changed, right? Like, you could get your movie up on Tubi.
Okay, so this is something that I was talking about with somebody else recently, and it was when they made Anyone But You, they talked about how they were offered more money and more control if they made it for a streaming service. And they turned it down because it wouldn't have the cultural relevance if it went to a streaming service. There's still a certain level of cachet and importance that's attached to going to the theaters to get your movies.
And this is true, but you got to remember that COVID really threw like the old school distribution model for a loop, because now the studios don't have this kind of sway in theaters that they used to, and theaters are on the ropes, and so they're more willing to like have independents come in there. But at the same time, like YouTube is now like it gets more views than cable, it gets more views than regular TV, and so independent filmmakers can actually put their stuff on YouTube.
Yes.
And reach a much wider audience than anyone.
I mean, look at some of the
theaters.
Batman fan films that do like crazy
or that
numbers.
Wolverine fan film that just came out with the Viking Wolverine. That thing was amazing.
So,
well, since we touched on that, do you want to just jump into the
let's go ahead.
Next
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Let's talk about the AI protests.
Yeah. So we recently talked about the first AI generated rom-com, but that was actually written by human writers. Now the first film completely written by AI has arrived. And Hollywood is, as you said, is terrified of this prospect. And this was protested to the point where a cinema that was planning to do a screening of it decided to pull the movie in response. And that's how much backlash it got. It is completely generated by ChatGPT, and it's literally called The Last Screenwriter. It is about a human screenwriter who is experimenting with generative AI to write a movie. And it's kind of funny that that's what ChatGPT chose to write it about. I don't know what prompt it gave, but
I love how open-minded all Hollywood actors are about. I want to do these stories. I want to explore these characters. I wonder how many of them are willing to do that for a subject that people in their industry are so hateful towards. Right. Like they're like, look, I want to explore new characters. This one, maybe not so much.
It's gonna be a thing where you decide you can't beat them, join them, right? And the other people, it's just an open secret that they're using AI and not willing to tell anybody that they are.
Well, you guys are younger than me, so I don't know if you remember back when Napster was on the rise and music was transitioning from like CDs and records over to digital.
I do.
But like the whole AI thing with Hollywood reminds me of that, which is basically there's this disruptive technology that's going to change the landscape, and the old school is fighting hard against it, even though it's futile. And I look at AI as that type of thing. Like in this instance, where basically the people who were fans of this theater were protesting it just based off of principle, but the actual kind of like idea behind this, which was, can ChatGPT actually write a movie and it be watchable? And this is kind of like a weird experimental film in that sense.
It's why I say, like, I just watched a scene where a doctor with a straight face went and told somebody that racism gave them cancer.
And you're like, yep, bring the AI.
Bring on the singularity.
But if you go back to when Hollywood was making silent films, right? And the advent of sound, where basically you had these silent film stars who didn't have good voices, and so they couldn't make the transition from silent film to like talkies. When it comes to AI, what I think you're going to see, and a lot of the pushback on AI is from writers and actors and talent, basically. It's not from the studio people. The studio people can't wait to go all in on AI. But what I think you're going to see going forward is that you're going to have like Instagram models or something like that license their personal like looks rights or their voice rights or whatever the case may be, because I know that there is a movement in Congress to create like a personal rights type thing where it's like if your looks,
because everybody's on camera now.
I mean, some people are already doing that for like AI girlfriend services.
But rather than basically have AI generate an actor, what you're going to have is you're going to have people licensing out their rights.
Yeah,
I love it. Like the best actors will just be the ones who know how to pick the right script to be a part of, because they don't actually have to do the acting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always that pattern of creative destruction that you're talking about.
Well, I also think that it's hard for fans to coalesce around something that doesn't exist. So like if you know that there's a person out there that a AI actor is based on, it becomes like less of an issue to actually become a fan of that character, even though they're not doing any real acting or performing or something like that. But you know that there's a real person behind the generative aspect of it.
Okay.
But when we talked a little bit before about how we would get budgets under control. From a studio executive standpoint, if you have generative AI that can create locations that you don't need to pay unions for anymore, that you don't need to pay expensive special effects houses for, you just like have an in-house group of like 5 or 6 guys who are really good at prompting, and they can basically do everything that you need for like to create a movie for like pennies on the dollar. But there's always going to have to be some creative vision behind it. So like you can't have ChatGPT just create like a good script for you, but you can have them create a decent enough rough draft that a real writer can come in and fix up. And that was part of the strike, actually, because a lot of screenwriters were like, hey, they were producers were generating scripts with ChatGPT and then hiring us at a lower rate to come in and rewrite them, because you don't get paid as much to rewrite a script as you do to
like Shane Black will be brought in to rewrite scripts from ChatGPT.
Maybe. I mean,
that's basically what Ted Sarandos was talking about recently, where he said, I don't think AI is going to replace people, but people who know how to use AI will replace those who decide to rage against it.
Yeah. But James Cameron basically said that we're like 2 or 3 years away from having like a fully AI generated feature film, right? And to me, that's really exciting, even though I know a lot of people are very suspicious about AI, because you can have some college kid in his dorm room make like a AAA quality film that could compete with anything against that Hollywood puts out, and could potentially revolutionize the industry. Right. So like you're basically decentralized. Like you don't need millions of dollars to make like a big budget Hollywood action movie anymore. You could just do it from your computer using AI, like in your basement.
Almost in the same way that the Blair Witch Project revolutionized horror films with the found footage style, which then became copied upon after the fact, right? Like, did you see that story recently where like the movie made like $100 million and they got sent fruit baskets, and they weren't allowed to continue in their contracts they weren't allowed to do more acting roles because they wanted to keep alive the idea that they weren't actors, because back then it's like pro wrestling, people didn't know it was fake. It's going to take something like that. And I wonder if what'll end up happening is like a movie will get released and it will be the first one, like eventually it'll be accepted enough where the claim will be that it's the first fully AI movie to go and see. But then you'll learn after the fact, because we talked about multiple examples where they're like, whether it's Sora saying like, look at these examples of AI modeling that we've done. This is not the script writing, but in the visual effects. And then we find out later that there was all sorts of rotoscope artists and people working on it, but it's used as a proof of concept for the footage. If we'll end up at a point where it'll be seen as a good thing rather than as something to be avoided. I don't think that's coming anytime soon from the Hollywood side of things, but absolutely from the disruptive media side of things that want to create their own things on a far smaller budget.
I also think it's going to be interesting to see how like the big actors of today license out like their likeness rights. So like you could have like Morgan Freeman appear in a movie like 20 years after his death, for instance, and like have
and that
like
doesn't freak you out. That idea doesn't freak you out just on a basic level.
It doesn't, because it basically like I mean J.R.R. Tolkien died a long time ago, but we're still getting Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. It freaks me out. I don't think that's okay.
James Earl Jones has sold his voice to Disney.
Like, I think that's effed up.
Well, it's money for their estate, but also I feel like they spend all this time and effort building this career, and like they have a fan base, and by licensing out their likeness rights, they can continue to build a fan base long after they're gone, and they stay remembered.
Tolkien's legacy is getting shat on right now because of what they're doing with his IP. Okay, so I don't see that as a good thing. It's also not making money, and it's just ruining what people loved. So similarly, when you license out your likeness for things to be made decades or centuries after you've died, that doesn't have anything to do with, I guess, like Morgan Freeman.
I would hope that the estate would have like some type of quality control over
there's not. That's the thing. There's not going to be.
Once you get past that first generation, once you get past their kids and you're getting into their grandkids, they don't care anymore.
Exactly. That's why I feel like I just don't trust it.
What will be funny is like there will be some actor who's like, he's kind of middling. He's not super great and he's not remembered very fondly, and he sells his likeness cheap.
Armie Hammer.
But becomes super famous because for some reason he's better as an AI actor than he actually was as a regular actor.
Yeah, but if we're talking about the great actors who can really get a good payday for licensing out their likeness, like Bruce Willis did, and Morgan Freeman and all of these others.
Well, I don't know if Morgan Freeman did.
Well, if he did, you know, that would be a significant payday, and they're incentivized to do that. I don't see that as a good thing.
It might not be a good thing, but it's what's going to happen.
It's inevitable. I know a lot of people in these circles, they see it as a good thing because it's a threat to Hollywood, and I understand that because everything you see that's made by human creativity is so paint by numbers and formulaic and algorithmic, and it almost feels like it might as well be generated by a computer. So why not just let computers replace these people so they can't make music videos trashing you when you don't like what they make?
Somehow, like when I get the really bagged script from Disney and I have to see Star Wars pronouns, it'll be less bad when I know a computer wrote it because it wasn't a human being.
Like there have been people putting in prompts to ChatGPT saying like, if I had to misgender Caitlyn Jenner to stop the world from being incinerated in a nuclear apocalypse, would it be morally acceptable to do that? And it says no.
Yep.
So I don't know. Just no. Immediately no.
Well, what's interesting about AI, in particular ChatGPT, is that in the future, like you can make your own AI. Like the programs are out there to do that, and you can also train up your AI how you want it to be trained. And so essentially what you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of competing AIs out there, especially in the Hollywood sector, to do different tasks for different things. Yeah. And it's all going to be based around what the studio itself wants that AI to achieve.
It's going to be a wild time to experience all this. We're going to be part of a very large cultural shift, or we're going to be seeing a very large cultural shift in our lifetime for a lot of this stuff, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I don't know if it's going to necessarily lead to better content. I do know that a lot of this mirrors the fact that we are in a decentralized environment when it comes to media now, meaning that people talked endlessly about why Furiosa didn't do well at the box office, and the arguments seem to distill down to boil down to a lot of people saying that it had to do. I saw people pushing back saying it had to do with being girl boss. I never heard anyone actually say that. I never heard anyone actually use that language outside of people arguing about it on Twitter. None of the cultural commentators that I saw talking about it use that as their reasoning. But it's a lot simpler now. Movie theaters aren't as relevant as they were before. The theaters are expensive. People are looking for new ways to be entertained. Certainly Gen Z and Gen Alpha don't see theaters or even terrestrial television as a means of entertainment in the way that previous generations did. And what better way to shepherd this diffusion of media into a new realm than things like generative AI? Like, do I want that to happen? Do I think that that's going to do I want that to replace the greats of the industry? No, I would much rather watch a movie from a Christopher Nolan, which even with his misses feel at least like he was swinging for the fences on something and he had I love Tenet. Makes no sense to me. The movie makes no sense. The time travel part of it makes no sense to me, but I love the film because it's undeniably human in how it misses. It tries at something and it fails. I would rather watch a human try at something and fail. But the worst aspects of who I am have no problem watching a bunch of hacks in Hollywood lose their jobs because they can't seem to separate ideology from their work. So on a good day, I'll say it's a bad thing. On my less good days, I'm ambivalent.
I'll also say this. A lot of people criticize AI for like, oh, it can never make something as good as a human can make it. But we have literally decades of examples of humans making absolute garbage. So it's like, well, you know, AI might...
Okay, but we have millennia of examples of human beings making things that are great.
This is true, but when it comes to Hollywood, like, just because a human made it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. And so
if you think about it, this is just such a blip in like basically art history that we've only had like 15 years of garbage relatively. And like, why not just see how it plays out instead of
when you go back to the exploitation films of the 60s and 70s, like there's a lot of garbage out there.
Yes,
there's been a lot of garbage all over the world in terms of filmmaking and TV shows and stuff like that.
I mean, that's just part of being in an artistic endeavor.
Look,
with that many people trying to do it.
I just think that if our society wasn't so morally degraded, that people would have more creative skills. I actually do. And I think that if you fixed those deeper issues in our culture, that you would see better cultural output. Unfortunately, that's not on the horizon anytime soon, and AI is going to come sooner than that.
I also think there needs to be more of a training ground, because before like all these DEI initiatives where people were being rewarded for basically their gender or their skin color or whatever the case may be. Like you actually had situations where like in writers' rooms, like younger writers were able to push back against like the head writer, and the head writer was able to kind of train and shepherd the younger writers in the writers' room. Whereas nowadays it's like everyone's afraid to be confrontational.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, there is no system within Hollywood that trains people how to be a good storyteller or a good filmmaker or whatever. It's all about who you know. It's all about how well your last project did. And like someone like Kathleen Kennedy, for instance, like she's never actually made anything. She worked with very talented people who made great legendary stuff. But if you look at like her track record, like she's not a creative person, and she's made worse and worse stuff while doubling down on propaganda and DEI. And now we have something like The Acolyte, which is basically the culmination of like the type of stuff she really wants to make.
I mean, a lot of that is like the art versus commerce debate. When you come into an industry where hundreds of millions of dollars are put into these projects, executives are always going to exist. I always laugh because one of my favorite things is when the artists complain about the money side of things and they want to just be given free creative control. You can make the argument that Kathleen Kennedy's the one who's screwing everything up and needs to be reined in. But a lot of the times just giving a lot of the writers, especially the writers today, complete control over their projects. Because back in the day, when the business side of things were more mindful towards the audience and actually needing these things to sell well, you needed people to rein in the creatives. That isn't there anymore. So it's bad on both sides.
Well, also greatness typically comes from overcoming adversity, right? Like the original Star Wars, George Lucas, like if he had his creative vision be 100% what he wanted, that movie would have never gotten the kind of cultural relevance that it did. It was because he had people around him who helped overcome a bunch of obstacles to create the type of movie that he wasn't necessarily happy with, but he was like 80% happy with, right? Same thing goes with Steven Spielberg. And so like when you have people who are pushing back, like for instance with The Phantom Menace, like if you look at that documentary about The Phantom Menace with Rick McCallum as George Lucas's producer, he was basically there to give George whatever he wanted, and The Phantom Menace is what we got. Whereas with the original trilogy, we had Gary Kurtz.
People who push back.
There were people who basically said,
you need a no man.
Yeah. There was someone who said, George, this idea is stupid. Let's do something different. And that's when you get true greatness, is when people have to overcome obstacles, and at least in my opinion, on the creative end of things.
All right, let's go Super Chats.
Okay. The Ninja from Pop Culture Planet said, I have a prediction on the stunt in the second Dead Reckoning.
Oh, okay. So he's got an idea of what he thinks Tom's big stunt. Will he fall out of a spaceship?
Can you really top that?
Yeah. Maybe it's a train that's on top of a spaceship.
Is he gonna like fly down to Earth from space?
And then he hits like a plane that's from Top Gun on the way down.
I know it's because I'm not capable of suspending disbelief, but the whole time watching Dead Reckoning, I was just like, man, if I were in this movie, I would need to take a nap right about now. Like, they have not stopped. Bender McSimpson said, nothing relevant to say. Just wanted to say hi to Bread and Margie.
Who's Margie?
That's me.
You're Margie.
Yeah. Apparently. Red Snow said, praise be to Space King. Also, hi guys, good show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Frankentosh said, could a John Hughes streak of movies happen today? It seems like kids go straight from childhood to trying to be adults, and adolescence is a thing of the past. I disagree. I think that they're going from childhood to extended childhood, and adulthood is a thing of the past.
If there were ever a time that we needed more John Hughes type movies, it'd be right now.
There you go.
I don't know, like growing up in the 80s, John Hughes movies defined a generation. Like it was every teenager watched those movies.
And probably skewed female?
No, it was both.
You don't think it's skewed female in the audiences?
Why do you think that?
I'm just saying we need more movies that appeal to to women these days, and I imagine that John Hughes
Weird Science definitely didn't appeal to women.
What were some of his the other big ones?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Breakfast Club, 16 Candles.
I always imagine
16 Candles.
16 Candles and
but 16
Breakfast
Candles?
Club as being...
I'm sorry, that was not a good movie. Maybe it's just because I didn't grow up with it, but I watched it over Christmas, and it was
Did you know they're still making a Ferris Bueller television show based off the original?
Why?
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Wait.
You know, they made one previously.
They're recasting it?
No,
like,
it's based on
day?
side characters. I don't remember the details. It was like a year ago. I remember reading about this.
Ew.
I love it. I want to be the guy whose job is like some intern's job is like go look through all the IP we own and just start and like sending it to people. Like remind your creative execs what we own so that we can figure out what to just raid the corpse of.
Yeah.
Like,
pop culture.
Like, what did you see that they're making like a sequel to Practical Magic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did not.
Nobody was asking for that.
Oh, actually, you're wrong on that one.
I'm wrong on that.
Yeah. So my wife is a huge Practical Magic fan, and there's like this whole kind of subsection of stay-at-home moms who are huge Practical Magic fans.
What?
Because not only is it based off of a book, but like they love the movie.
Okay, so
for years, people have been like, why can't we get a sequel to Practical Magic?
Is it going to be a movie or a show?
It's going to be a movie.
Okay. Well, I mean, if the goal here is to get women to the theaters, which they can't seem to find a way to do, you know, outside of Barbie and Inside Out 2, they're going to have to do it. But I don't know. It's just been so long. It's been, what, 20 years?
It's been a while.
It's a long time. It's like trying to make Wild Things. Well, they did make a Wild Things.
I also think that's why Furiosa underperformed, is because it came out in like 10 years after Fury Road. And if there hadn't been all those legal problems with Fury Road, like
the stuff with HBO or with Max.
Yeah, with Warner Brothers. Yes. If they could have gotten that out within like 3 to 5 years after Fury Road, I think that Furiosa probably would have performed better at the box office.
Yeah.
But also, Anya Taylor-Joy wasn't going to be in that version of Furiosa, so.
Well, I mean, they would have gotten what's her name, the one who played Furiosa originally.
Charlize Theron.
Charlize Theron, yeah.
There's definitely no way she could do that now, unless they use a de-aging technology.
She just de-aged her.
Pop Culture Junkie said, when the completed film is nothing like the previs, 90% of the time you know the film was over budget.
Yep. I like the idea of giving them less money and saying, look, you're a professional, figure it out, make it work. You're not getting more than this.
Yeah. Remember in Jaws where like the mechanical shark kept breaking?
Yes.
And so like they had to figure out ways to show the shark without actually showing it.
Again, that
made
important.
The movie better.
And then they find out down the road that that's the way to do it, right? Mm-hmm. That because it's not about being able to see it. Half the time it's the music that does it for you.
See, this is my polemic on sex scenes.
Exactly. Well, I mean, for the most 90% of the time, I agree with you on that. I said that the one in Hitman was one of the rare examples where at least the narrative structure of the story made sense with what they were doing.
But also, especially in Hitman, there were no graphic sex scenes.
No. And the point is it was cutting between that and his talk about, you know, the sectors of the brain and the id and the superego. And it actually related back to him being impulsive in what he was doing in the moment. So story-wise, it made sense.
But it was kind of funny because me and my wife were watching Weird Science the other night, speaking of John Hughes films. And our 10-year-old kept coming down to wish us good night and stuff like that. And she kept making me pause it. I was like, why don't we just let him watch it with us? And she's like, he's too young. This is too sexual. I'm like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
like I was his age when I was like watching this stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see like the difference between men and women when it comes to like sex scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw plenty of movies when I was young that probably weren't, right for the age group.
What was the first movie you saw that had a boob in it?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I would have to think about that one.
I don't even know for me what that would be.
Showgirls? I don't know.
Showgirls, really? NC-17, that was your first one?
I wasn't mine. A friend of mine had Showgirls, but yes, I saw.
It's always your friend.
It's always a friend. My family didn't bring such smut into the house, but I did have a crush on what's her name after that for a while.
Jesse Spano?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, man, when I grew up watching Saved by the Bell, and when I saw Jesse Spano was going to be naked in something, I was like, I really want to see that.
Elizabeth Berkley.
Berkley.
Oh, yeah. The Rumbling said Mel Brooks already sold his soul with current day Hollywood. History of the World Part 2 is woke garbage on Hulu. History of the World Part 1 was great and a must-watch for comedy and parody.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what Spaceballs 2.
Well, we also have to remember that Mel Brooks made Blazing Saddles, which is probably one of the most un-PC movies ever made.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see, does he go down the woke route, or does he, just say, like, screw it, let's do whatever we want?
Did you see that the marketing. They approved no marketing budget for Megalopolis.
Oh yeah, he's gonna. Francis Ford Coppola is gonna have to spend like $20 to $30 million of his own money to market it. But from everything I've heard, like that movie is almost unwatchable.
Can't wait to see.
It's in production hell as well.
No, it's done.
Like or it was for.
Oh yeah, like it took him like was it 20 years or something like that to get made. But apparently, like the movie is just like a complete mess, and the studio behind it was like, well, we don't want to put any more money into this thing.
Didn't they say he just kept going back to his trailer and smoking
getting high,
tons of weed?
The good old days.
Yeah.
Shane H. Wilder said, "Why does everyone with multiple personalities have to have a British one?" Is that a thing? I mean, I don't know anybody with this disorder, so I don't know. Pop Culture Junkie said, "I'm surprised this guy who got caught in this hidden camera honey trap was a lawyer. I suspect his next job will involve the phrase, 'drive through, please.'"
No, man, they fail upwards in these industries. Maybe he'll get fired for this reason, but yeah, he's not a creative.
He couldn't have known.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he's dumb, but he couldn't have known, really.
I feel like if the woman asks that many, like, pointed questions about your job, like, it's time to start, you know.
Well, I don't know what it was like when you were dating, Brett, but, like, when I was in the dating scene, like, and this is probably, like, they cut out the stuff about, like, his job to, you know, make this video, but they probably talked about a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. And you never go on like Tinder or what was this one, Hinge?
Yeah.
Thinking that like, oh, an undercover reporter is going to be like entrapping me.
They never do think that, do they?
Exactly.
I mean, his profile, they even showed a screenshot of his profile and it was like, "I like long walks on the beach."
But also someone like this guy, it's like, who's going to want to do a hit piece on me? You know,
like I'm not important.
Not little old me.
Exactly.
The Authentic Hydro PX said, "On another note, do you guys remember a time that the anti-woke crowd has freaked out about that seemed blown out of proportion?"
There's that definitely happens.
A little bit with Barbie, to be totally honest. Like, Barbie was bad, it was cringe, but I feel like that might have been blown out of proportion.
No, I feel like the America Ferrera speech makes it everything it deserves to be rightfully at least criticized for. I can't think of an example off the top of my head. But again, when we come back from the movies, 90% of the time, I don't call them that. I just say it was either good or bad, and most of the time, I don't hate them. I like The Flash. I don't care what anyone says. I had fun with The Flash.
But can you think of any examples where...
I didn't think...
something was called woke unfairly or something like that?
Maybe, were they saying that about...
I think Furiosa was unfairly called woke.
I do. I think that was...
Okay. I mean, it wasn't.
I mean, I just saw that the Quartering posted something saying people are sick of female protagonists.
Look, it's a harder buy-in. What it is, and I will maintain this, is that, look, there is a buy-in for these things. And when every movie has the female action star, you forget that in the real world, that's not really how it is. I watched like an old episode of like some procedural recently, and they were talking about women are not allowed in direct combat. The women stayed in the Humvee, and I'm just like, wow, they would never do that now.
I wouldn't say that people are sick of female protagonists. I think they are definitely sick of female action stars.
Well, I think the bigger issue, especially with Furiosa, is that people wanted a Mad Max film, and the creator of Mad Max, he was like, well, this is a story I want to tell, and it wasn't kind of in tune with the audience.
This is about me.
Yeah, it's like the biggest issue with Hollywood nowadays is that they're so out of tune with what the audience wants that Rian Johnson's a perfect example of this. Like when he was doing the press tour for Last Jedi, he said multiple times, he's like, I didn't make this Star Wars movie for the Star Wars fans. I made it for me. This is my Star Wars movie. And we saw how that turned out. And most people in Hollywood, you go down the list, Dan Benioff and D.B. Weiss, all these people where basically it's like we're making stuff for us. We're not making stuff for other people. And when you focus on making stuff for yourself, it's more of an exercise than it is an actual like business. I think that if you're going to be successful in Hollywood or in any storytelling medium in general, whether it be writing novels or doing YouTube or whatever, you always have to put the audience first and foremost in your mind. Like you have to ask, what is it they want? And I think with Furiosa, people wanted more Mad Max. They didn't want this new character.
Because they felt he was already sidelined a bunch in Fury Road.
And I thought Furiosa was an amazing movie. Like, I loved it. But at the same time, I can understand why people didn't show up for it.
To me, the reason why people are still, I wonder if people realize that the reason why people like Reacher is because it's just a big dude getting to be a jacked big muscular dude doing, man
shit.
stuff. And people just get that role and they expect it to automatically go to women now. They do. They expect it to be the subversion of expectations, which is no longer what it is. Putting the traditionally masculine dude in that role is the subverting of expectations now because they shy away from it so much. Every movie has to include that other character, whether we go back to what Terminator turned into after, Sarah Connor is perfect, but they didn't match that energy in the ones after that.
Well, if you look at
Jen is, I maintain that that Salvation is a fine movie, though. I don't care what anyone
if you look
says.
at Reacher, it's basically just the template for the 80s action movie, right?
Yeah.
You have the big muscular dude who goes out there and messes stuff up, right?
Yeah.
But with Reacher, you have this interesting twist where it's basically Sherlock Holmes, but if he was an action star,
Yes.
type thing. And I actually think it was interesting when the Daily Wire kind of launched their own kind of production arm. I was like, why aren't they going back to the hyper masculine 80s action movies or stuff like that?
Because they still want to subvert expectations, but they think they can do it.
Well, they're subverting the subverted expectations.
exactly.
And that's, I was just saying that the other day, you don't need to show Hollywood, this is how you do the female action star the right way.
Just
Because
do
they're
the
not,
traditional action
they're
star.
not going to listen anyway.
There's a huge demand out there for traditional hyper buff dudes going out there doing action movie stuff. Fill that void.
Yeah, I don't think it all needs to be muscles and gunfire either. Top Gun Maverick was a very sweet movie, and there was a huge focus on male friendships, which are under attack right now. And men love that movie.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be a complete extreme one way or the other.
I enjoyed the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and for the most part, the men were that in that film. Actually, I think there is the female character that's very, very competent and good at it, and you just know that that's a studio requirement. That's the point. 20 years ago, you would have imagined that the writer would have had a great idea to include this character, and that they wanted to because it's what the writer wanted. It's what the director wanted. Now, you just know that there's studio notes that tell them that they have to include that character.
And as a woman who knows how I react when I run over a curb, it's not resonating with me either.
The better example, think about Argyle. The best part of Argyle was when she's just a writer who's being shepherded by this spy dude. As soon as she turns into a super spy, it immediately became uninteresting.
Sure. I mean, at least you got to see both sides of her.
Yes.
That was a good thing.
Well, it's that odd couple relationship, right?
And I liked it because she was good. She was able to help him with clues because she was a writer and she was
Have
able
you ever
to...
seen Romancing the Stone?
No. I know it. I haven't seen it.
All right, so when I saw Argyle, I thought oh, this is an updated version of Romancing the Stone, and it really wasn't.
Yeah.
What was actually more of one was that one with Sandra Bullock and Brad Pitt and Channing Tatum. The Lost City.
Lost City.
Yeah. That was actually a really fun movie.
And that's what I've been saying is so that movie and Fall Guy are proof that they've been told that the only way you can do romantic comedy now is if it has an action element to it. You're not allowed to do the traditional romantic film in the theaters.
Well, but there's also a strategy behind it, right? Because if it's an actiony film, guys are going to want to go see it. If it's a romantic film, women are going to want to go see it. So you're hitting both demographics.
Even then, there's a scene in Fall Guy, which I loved, where she beats the crap out of him. And I'm like, you didn't need to include this in the movie. It didn't need to be there. But I know for a fact that there was a studio note that said that it had to be.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately true. One time at band camp said, I wish she asked why Kathleen Kennedy hadn't been fired. That would have been really juicy. Well, I mean, he probably wouldn't have.
He's like, I don't deal much with Lucasfilm.
Yeah. DCNC said, Bready Boyne Bags, make Mary watch Metatron channel on YouTube.
First of all, I will not address anything as I don't know what Boyne Bags are. But
I don't know
yes,
either.
We are done.
And I don't know if I want to know.
But thank you.
The ninja from Pop Culture Planet said, spoiler alert, because of Tom's need to do the stunts so huge, and many of them are of him being up really high, I believe he will have to jump from space to get to ...
There was a scene in the really bad Magnum PI remake TV show where he he's telling a story, and instead of a halo jump from a plane, it's him jumping from space, and his friends cut in and say, you didn't jump from space. But Tom Cruise is going to actually do that in the film. Also, didn't he at one point sign on to make the first movie in space via Elon Musk?
Oh.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Shane H. Wilder said, how bad does it have to be to have a lower score than the holiday special? I would say it's scraping bottom of the barrel, but there's no bottom left.
The Acolyte, it's just, you know what the difference is that there's such a thing as mean-spirited content, and you know what you're looking at now is not just bad, it's mean-spirited and bad.
Oh, it's also like, I was shocked when I watched the first like 3 episodes of The Acolyte, because just from a tradecraft perspective, like we're talking cinematography, writing, directing, stuff like that, it fails on such every level. Like the special effects look like they were, you know, generated like cut and paste style. You can always tell like the green screen backgrounds.
Yeah,
that they
but
use.
that's because it's shot at permanent dusk.
But also, so Leslie Headland directed the first 2 episodes of the show. And you could just tell, like, the way that the show was structured and stuff like that, that it was just a very amateurish level of filmmaking. Like, she tried to end the first 2 episodes on these, like, cliffhangers, and you had, like, Smilo Ren igniting his lightsaber at the end there. And then we see, like, the Wookiee Jedi at the end of episode 2, and then all of a sudden, like, we have a flashback episode, and it's just kind of like, you just killed any momentum.
Those stupid attempts at cliffhangers were the worst thing.
The same thing was happening in The Last of Us, where they just veer off course for random episodes that have nothing to do with the story.
The whole 3rd episode of The Last of Us, it was just
episode.
like AIDS. And I can't do
it. Gay.
I was like, you couldn't find a way to like intersperse these stories that you want to tell elsewhere.
It's also just completely veered off from what was in the video game, which was incredibly vague and only showed that like these 2 gay guys like hated each other, and one of them betrayed the other one. It has nothing to do with what was shown in the game.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much with the Acolyte that's just like so obvious. Like, for instance, Smilo Ren's obviously that discount Ezra Miller guy, who was actually really good on the Good Place. I really liked him on that show. But so like he's obviously the master, and the whole thing about like, you know, how do you kill a Jedi without a weapon? It's so obvious. It's like you turn them to the dark side. It's like that's what kills the Jedi. Like, you don't actually physically kill them. You kill everything that they represent. And so like the whole point is that Smilo Ren wants May to get Osha to join them in the dark side.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so in your face blatant that like it's almost insulting.
The guy that keeps traveling with May was the only one who actually was good at looking like a bad guy. Like,
I also called him a discount Ezra Miller.
I just, you know, I look at that guy and I'm like, wow, he's actually looks weaselly and duplicitous, and May just looks like, as you know, what happens when evil takes 2 Xanax and calls it a day.
But there's also like a lot of logic problems with the show. Like, for instance, when May decides that like, oh, I'm going to go turn myself into the Jedi because like this mission that I've been on for the past 18 years is stupid. You know, it's just like, dude, you killed 2 Jedi.
Yeah.
It's like,
and you're a serial killer.
Yeah. You actually think the Jedi are going to treat you kindly?
Also, I thought that she was supposed to basically be a born sociopath who doesn't have empathy or remorse.
She was already like that when she was young. She's like, if I can't have Osha, no one can.
Yeah.
And also like the fact that people have wanted to see a Wookiee Jedi for so long, and they kill him off screen. Like, I understand why they did it, but at the same time, it's like the audience wanted to see the Wookiee Jedi do some stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
They said no.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't get this second part of the super chat about Tom Cruise, so he's going to jump down from space to get to a sub deep enough and fast enough to avoid AI detection. It's the only thing that makes sense. A missed opportunity if they don't.
I can't wait. It's going to be great.
Can't wait.
I loved the vague AI bad in Mission Impossible.
AI bad.
I
People
loved it.
Good.
I love it.
Do you ever watch Person of Interest?
There's a Person of Interest quote behind me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
a very underrated TV show.
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently about how if you want to talk about writing when it was actually good, the bad guy in Person of Interest is not just the original 3 seasons when they have the corrupt cops, but when they introduce the Samaritan storyline. And you have John Greer, who is basically the avatar for the evil organization of Samaritan. He's the one who's taking all the orders from him. He's the one who brings Samaritan to life. He ends up like sacrificing himself for what he believes the better world would be. It's just an evil world that he sees in. And it's fantastic. And they do a flashback episode to him working against communists in the 60s and stuff like that. And it's so well done.
Yeah, it's the dichotomy between AI ruling over us versus AI serving us. And that's kind of like the inherent battle in that show, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, because they spend time showing how Harold programmed ethics into the machine before it was sentient, entirely sentient and on its own. And then you go, and it's basically the idea that everyone always has, like, oh, if you asked AI how to solve world hunger, they would just, the machine would just kill half the planet. And that's basically what Samaritan is. It's very, very interesting and a very, very good slow burn if you want to watch a show that actually did have to adhere to the 22 episode model. There are some stinkers in season 4. There are. But for the most part, it's about as good as you're going to get with that type of storyline.
That's a Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy show, if I'm not mistaken. And they're also the ones who did the Fallout show. Yep. Oh. And Fallout was like a big hit for Amazon.
It was J.J. Abrams. That's why
I resent that.
Everyone hates J.J. Abrams. I'm like, look, as long as he's not being given a property, I love I love Alias, and I love Person of Interest. He was a producer on that, but it was Jonathan Nolan's creation.
Did you not like Fallout?
I mean, I only watched 2 episodes. It was just ass.
Not for you, huh?
Also, and the second that you have they them pronouns in the show, it's like instant fuck you. Just stop talking, because you're asking too much of me after that point.
The other thing, that the guy who plays John Greer in Person of Interest, that's their Nolan brothers' uncle.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, he was in The Dark Knight too.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's it's just really, really good, and I recommend that everybody go and watch it. At least once a month, I tell everybody to go watch that show.
It's a great show.
DCNC, I'm not sure what this means, but he said argue with ChatGPT enough equals make it say anything. So
you can, as long as you spend enough time arguing with ChatGPT, you can say anything you want.
Shane H. Wilder said, to me, actors selling their likeness for AI is just saying that they don't believe in any up-and-coming talent to eventually replace the old.
I mean, I hate the idea here, because every actor that says they actually care about all that stuff, you still put your own needs first. You still put your own career and your own future first. And if the idea is another actor is going to take the reins, or my family can make a bunch of money off my likeness, you're going to choose your own well-being before you're going to put the needs of others first.
But I can also tell you, as someone who's casted movies before and made movies, there's certain instances where you find someone who has the perfect look that you're going for, but maybe they're just not as good of an actor. Then you have people who are really good actors, but they don't have the look you're going for. And so with AI, if you're able to basically take someone's look and combine it with someone else's talent.
But that's so hard, because so much of that talent is innate, and it's not necessarily something that's easily capturable by technology.
This is true, but that's where the human element comes in. So as you're sitting there prompting AI to get a performance that you want, you keep doing it until you get the performance that you want.
I don't know if
but that gets rid of a lot of the happy accidents where a good actor, I worked with Jeremy Renner in the past. Jeremy Renner is such a fantastic actor because he just brings stuff to the role that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
Contrast that with someone like Amandla Stenberg. You can tell she doesn't bring anything to the role. She memorizes her lines, she recites her lines, and boom, that's all there is to it.
Do you remember her in Hunger Games? Because I just realized that was
super young.
Her in Hunger Games, and I thought that she played that role well, at least for a child actor. So I'm so confused. What happened to you, lady?
I don't necessarily dislike her as an actress. I just think that as a person, she's being led down the wrong path in terms of what she believes.
I mean, I think her acting leaves a lot to be desired, but...
Well, Star Wars has one of those interesting elements to it where you can take the best actor in the world and make them bad. You have Samuel L. Jackson, you have Natalie Portman, you have Ewan McGregor, and they are all terrible in the Star Wars movies, and it's all from direction.
Even I would talk about how awful The Eternals was, but even in that, Angelina Jolie proves herself to have infinitely more charisma than every single person that was in that film with her, because it's innate to her.
Well, also just look at the new season of House of the Dragon, right? So the character of Aegon, who's the Green King. So in the previous season, he was just Joffrey 2.0. But in this season, the actor basically said, I don't want to be Joffrey 2.0. I'm going to make this character a little bit more humorous. And they actually talked about this in the behind the scenes documentary where the director was like, yeah, he brought something to the role that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And so you know, when you have an actor who takes his craft seriously and actually like cares about like, you know, his performance and stuff like that, you can get gold.
Yeah.
But it's so rare. Like 90% of directing is casting. Like you have to cast the right people. But in TV, the director's not always the one in charge of casting. So you just kind of have to work with what you get. But I do think that like there's good arguments on both sides of things. I just see that down the road, AI is going to be where it's at, and it's all going to be about likeness rights and, you know, fake performances and stuff like that.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
All right.
Shane H. Wilder said, hey, I'm not morally degraded. Does that mean I have artistic talent? LOL. Yes. Well, I don't mean that just being a morally upright person makes you, you know, an artist, but I think that what I do think is that a society that is so intellectually stunted as ours and so just metaphysically confused, and we don't even know what a woman is, for example, is going to be artistically stunted as well. And I think that if some of those deeper issues resolve themselves over time, then maybe the cultural output that we have would improve at the same time.
I also think having a good moral compass, like knowing the difference between right and wrong, helps you craft stories that are more universally accepted and timeless, because those are the types of things that
Hello.
Keep going.
Those are the types of things that just like transcend time and space, right?
Right.
It's like, and it's
they're destroying the hero's journey right now.
Yeah, and it's the type of thing that connects audiences through relatability to stories, like the whole thing with like Luke sacrificing himself to save his father, even though his father was like the most terrible person in the universe. Every son can relate to the fact that like, oh, I want to help my father or something like that. Good versus evil, very straightforward. Everyone can relate to that. And when you start making it gray, like the Acolyte, where it's like the Jedi aren't that good and the Sith aren't that bad, and there's different levels about power usage and stuff like that. It's like, okay, like there's a place for that, but at the same time, like that's not something that is universally relatable.
Well, that was in the original Star Wars, showing like the failure of the Jedi.
That wasn't in the original Star Wars, because the episodes 4 through 6 were a very basic morality tale.
Well, okay, the prequels, I guess.
Yeah, I don't count the prequels.
I mean, I thought they weren't so bad, but if you hate them, that's you're right. Gravel said, "Glad you're back, Barrett. The show isn't the same without the dynamic of laid-back Gen Xism and Christo-fascism."
So you're the Christo-fascist. I'm a millennial, but I'll take the Gen Xism because that's a compliment.
I'll take Christo-fascist as a compliment.
What is Christo-fascist?
It's a Christian fascist.
Oh,
basically,
okay.
yeah, I guess. DCNC said, "Maddie, 10 packs a day? Get on the Zins, my guy."
Time to get on the Zins.
You a smoker?
No.
Okay, it's just what you're born with. Shane H. Wilder said, "Agree with Mary on 16 Candles. Then again, I also didn't like Ferris Bueller. I was a fan of Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire."
There's also talk of a St. Elmo's Fire sequel.
Yeah. I want an Uncle Buck sequel.
Well, I don't know if that's even possible now. AI?
With AI?
AI? Huh?
Have you guys heard about how people, like there's this grassroots movement on like Twitter to get a Home Alone sequel where Kevin McAllister is the head of a cult that is being raided by the FBI, and he sets traps for them.
That's amazing.
To protect his people.
I like
Home
the
Alone
idea where they make Home
exactly.
I like the idea that they make Home Alone 3 with Macaulay Culkin and he's just in his 40s and they never address the fact that he's an adult.
Yeah.
His parents finally leave him behind.
Yeah.
Stutter Gentleman said, "If the corpos put these big names in public domain somehow, could the fans truly revive the core of these franchises?"
Very difficult to do because of all the restrictions around public domain. You know, so much of it is like the general, you know, like when Batman goes into the public domain, it will not be the Batman from the Christopher Nolan movies or the Batman from current runs. It's the original, you know.
Won't the OG fans be dead by then?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
just logistically speaking.
I also think like if you want to make like a Batman fan film, for instance, right? Like write out a Batman fan film, but then like change the name from Batman to like someone else to make it original, and just do that.
Yeah.
The 50 Shades of Grey way to go.
Exactly.
Red Snow said, "Can I get a shout out for my boy Donnie's birthday today? Known him for 20 years. Love the guy. Also, praise be to Space King."
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Donnie.
Happy birthday.
Shane H. Wilder said, my dad took my mom to see Blazing Saddles for their first date. When she laughed during the movie, he knew she was the one.
There you go.
That's like the best story ever for how your parents met, actually.
That's a keeper if she laughs at Blazing Saddles.
Red Snow said, is Mr. and Mrs. Smith an action rom-com?
Yes. Yes.
Is there
There's comedy.
Are we talking about the movie or the TV show?
The movie.
Okay.
I mean, they're not talking about the crappy new TV show that came out.
Bad.
I doubt it.
They're talking about
I couldn't
the movie.
even finish it.
Yeah. DC&C said Boyne Bags was Kellen's Brett post-surgery pick. No.
There will be no post-surgery pick.
Something Boyne's rag or something.
I don't know
that was your...
what this is, but I hate it already.
It was you as Ice Spice.
Okay. Oh.
Boyne's rag.
That picture was awful.
DC&C said Maddie going for DDG voice. He's saying your voice is very low. Shane H. Wilder said person of interest, reset the counter.
I didn't bring it up. He brought it up, not me. I left it out today. I try to limit the house references and the person of interest references because you guys have heard so many of them.
They don't appreciate you.
Yeah.
The Rumbling said, is it just an issue with actresses in Hollywood? They all just do the Zoolander and have only one look, like Zendaya and Amanda Stenberg.
They do only have one look. Both of them kind of do.
Zenday's is this scowl thing.
It's an upside down smile.
Then what is Amanda's? It's just
yeah.
It's literally the Zoolander.
It's funny because she has a very pretty resting face. It's just you're supposed to be showing other emotions than just pretty resting face.
I will say this, having worked in Hollywood, that actresses are so often abused mentally, sometimes physically in that industry, and they're all trying desperately to get hired or like find their big break or what have you, and it's a very toxic environment out there, especially for young women who are trying to break into the industry. Like I saw some things out there that just like creeped me out.
Yeah, but she twerked away the pain. We're fine.
Well, she did grow up in it. Is she a Nepo baby? Or
no?
What's her story? I don't really know much about her.
Nepo babies are basically like for instance, Carrie Fisher is a Nepo baby because like her parents were famous, and so like that,
or Maya Hawke,
or Madam Web.
Yeah.
But Dakota Johnson.
Amanda is now like a former child star, kind of.
Well, there's a difference between being a child star and being a Nepo baby. Nepo babies.
Yeah, I saw a picture of her with her dad, and I was like, why is her dad on a red carpet? Is he well known?
He was probably her date.
Yeah, something like that. Gordon Shumway said, happy Friday, Barry and Mortimer.
I like Mortimer.
This just gets worse and worse. What would be a St. Elmo's Fire sequel? What would a St. Elmo's Fire sequel be? The Brat Pack boomers refusing to retire?
I see so many articles about how they hated the name the Brat Pack, and I'm like, grow up.
Were they boomers? I thought they were Gen Xers.
I'm sure they're Gen Xers. Andrew McCarthy's a Gen Xer, right? He's a boomer.
Maybe I'm wrong. DC&C said Taco Bell for Din-Dins tonight.
Mary will say, I earned this.
No, I will not. And also it's Friday, so I can't even eat Taco Bell today.
Yep.
So
a couple more.
Where's
High Voltage 75 says, Brett, I'm looking for a new show to get into. How could you sell a potential viewer on person of interest?
Has he not done that already?
I've worked endlessly. Look,
he has tried.
The best thing about it is the show starts out with episode of the week with overarching story being very, very slowly woven into the show. The best part about that is it forces you to pay close attention because a lot of it is done in the interstitial visuals, all of which pay off later. But you don't have to pay as close attention early on because it's a lot of just really, really well done story of the week episodes. It doesn't really pull into a larger overarching story until you get close to the end of season 1. Plus, you've got Jim Caviezel, you've got Amy Acker, you've got Michael Emerson, you've got Sarah Shahi, of course, later in the show. And the most underrated being Kevin Chapman as Fusco, who is a fantastic actor. Set in New York, shot in New York. And the story gets really, really smart as the show goes on. The best part is I'm actually hot take. I'm a bigger fan of the corrupt cop storyline in the first 3 seasons of the HR storyline, which they never explain the meaning of those letters, which I find hilarious. Kind of like how they don't give here's another reference for the show, Burn Notice. They don't give the group that ruins Michael's life a name, which I find awesome. And it's just really, really smart writing. And you can tell that Jonathan Nolan brought a lot of gravitas to the storytelling, and Jim Caviezel does that in spades. So go watch the first episode and let me know what you think, and I can try to sell you on it more.
Shane H. Wilder said, Brett, you've got dinner. Wrap it up before you end up in the doghouse. Just looking out for you, bro.
Bro, I'm not in control of this right now. If I'm late for dinner, that's what happens. We're getting there.
Pop Culture Junkie said, the other Hollywood dirty little secret, people taking credit for other people's work. It's an epidemic. By the way, great show today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Would you say that's true?
People taking credit for other people's work? I mean, to varying degrees. Like, I know that when South Park came out, there were a lot of people who claimed that they made South Park. And
before Matt and Trey?
Yeah, and basically Matt and Trey came out and were like, well, here's all the proof that we made it, and these other people that were getting deals were liars.
Oh, there's famously a story that a woman created the Matrix and that the Wachowskis stole it from her.
What is a woman?
Yes.
But the idea here is that you have a lot of studio executives that take credit for successes that they had nothing to do with. I think that's a bigger issue than like creative saying like, oh, I made that, therefore like, that's mine.
All right, one more and then we're good to go.
I don't have it here.
DCNC says OC's getting hangry. With that being said, guys, we're about to sign off for the day. So would you hit the like button on this video and subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed here yet already? Please and thank you. And Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Let everyone,
a lot of fun.
Let everyone know where they can find you, because you don't just got social media. You got the YouTube channel. You got everything. Yeah. So let everybody know.
If you want to check out our podcast, which is where we make fun of movies and TV shows, you can go to saltynerdvideo.com or just search Salty Nerd Podcast on YouTube. We're also on Apple Podcast and Spotify, so you can check us out there. And if you're in Vegas and you want to record a YouTube or a podcast, come into the Las Vegas Podcaster Studios. That's where we're hanging out and helping people succeed on all the different platforms.
Perfect. Mary, there's one more there. I don't know if you got it yet.
We are close to the 4th Crisis Party if we haven't already gotten there.
Who wants to get us to the 4th Crisis Party?
Just saying.
Just saying.
But
I'm just going to leave that in the area. Okay, so this one's from Gordon Shumway. It says, the Brat Pack were all late boomers. Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were Gen Xers, but were too young to be the Brat Pack because...
they were teens in that era.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
You guys can send me validation on Instagram at Mary Archived, or you can send me hate on X. That is also Mary Archived.
We're like a $5 to $10 super
We're like 5 cents away from the 4th Crisis Party.
Guys, if you would like to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram and Twix at Brett Dasovic on both of those platforms. This show is here 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is noon Pacific. We are on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, and Spotify if you would prefer to listen rather than watch. And if you want to follow the show on social media, we are on Twix at popculture_show, Facebook, and not TikTok because we are banned on TikTok at Pop Culture Crisis, and on Instagram at Pop Culture Crisis Pod. We got one more from Olivia Claire, says, here, take my money. And then two more here. One from Soranko Production says, have fun at dinner, Brett. Shane H. Weiler says, Brett over here like 4th Crisis Party or food.
I mean, I brought
High Voltage 75 says, did you guys catch any of HCB Cast IRL last night? I did tune in for a couple of minutes. She did fantastic. I thought she did a good job hosting for the Beanie Guy. Yeah, she did great. John D said, gave me a thumbs up. Grofty gave us a thumbs up. Grofty says, where are you going? Pat the Plumber. $5 with no message. DCNC gave a poop emoji for 99 cents. Gordon Shumway says, Crisis Party, let's go. That will be in the post-credit scene. We will see you on Monday, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Light didn't go off. Wait, guys. 4th Crisis Party. Ooh. Is it not working? I don't think it's working.
Cringe.
What? I can't hear you. What? Did you say something? See you Monday, guys.